Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach was born in São Paulo in May 1987. She grew up in a wealthy family and is the eldest of two children. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, is a successful and respected lawyer in the city. Her boyfriend Felipe Caffé, who comes from the same city, was born in July 1984. However, he was raised in a large family with quite difficult economic conditions. Since childhood, he had to work part-time to support himself and help his family. When the two met while still in school, they gradually developed a friendship and then became the first love of their youth. They had to hide their relationship in every possible way. It is worth noting that Liana's parents were religious and raised their daughter strictly. Liana was educated in religious values and participated in religious activities since she was a child, and her parents did not support romantic relationships when she was young. In addition, social inequality also played an important role. Liana came from a wealthy family, but she chose a man from a poor family. The prohibition of her parents did not make the young people give up on each other, but on the contrary, they decided to hide their relationship and secretly date in private places to avoid detection. In the fall of 2003, Liana and Felipe planned a trip to a remote and deserted land. Before starting the trip, they prepared carefully so as not to be discovered by their families. Felipe informed his parents that he was going camping with his friends, while Liana said that she was going to visit a church with her friends. She thought that this reason was convincing enough for her parents to believe her and agree to let her go without further questions. Liana and Felipe's family believed the story the children had created, so Liana and Felipe could enjoy life without worrying about their families finding out. The two were happy to be able to spend a week together. Liana and Felipe decided to go to Guasu province, which had beautiful scenery. They brought with them essentials such as tents, sleeping bags, personal belongings, and some food supplies. However, financial problems caused difficulties for the young couple. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they made detailed plans to get to their destination by bus. On the early morning of October 31st, Liana and Felipe met at the designated location. They kept the meeting a secret for fear of being discovered. First, they took the first bus, then arrived at another city in the evening. Here, they stayed overnight at the bus station. Then, they continued traveling by two more buses to reach their desired destination. They then walked a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the forest, where they planned to make a fire and enjoy some private time together. The weather was warm, with a little sunshine, and although a little tired from the long journey, Liana and Felipe were still happy, joking and planning their vacation. As the couple walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay, they caught the eye of a group of locals near a pond. They were Paulo Cesar de Silva Marquez, nicknamed Peranbuku, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chiino. Chiino, 16 years old but already the leader of the gang, thought that there was something valuable in the couple's backpack. The robbers stealthily followed the couple and hid deep in the bushes. While Liana and Felipe set up their tent and had a snack, they were unaware that they were being followed. The robbers waited until they were sure that there were only two young men and that they were not carrying weapons. Then Peranbuku and Chiino attacked Liana and Felipe. The robbers searched all the bags and backpacks, but found nothing of value. The robbers then decided that they could demand ransom from the couple's relatives. Liana, too scared, immediately said that she came from a wealthy family and that her father would give them as much money as they wanted. The robbers were delighted to hear this information. While the plan to extort money was being finalized, the robbers thought about how much money they could extort. To prevent the couple from escaping, the robbers took them to an abandoned house near the farm, but the house had no windows or doors. They then decided to take the couple to the house of a gang member. When the robbers could not find the way to collect the ransom, they tied up and brutally beat Felipe so that he could not escape or resist. Then all the gang members took turns raping Liana. After torturing the two for a while, the next morning, the robbers took the couple to a secluded place in the forest. The robbers led Felipe, who was seriously injured, deep into the forest. Then, there was a gunshot from deep in the forest. Liana realized what had happened and that her lover was no longer alive. The robbers told her that they had released Felipe and that the robbers wanted to keep her, treating her like a toy until they got bored of her. After their daughter left, Liana's parents soon discovered that she had not gone on a church outing with her friends as she had said. Her parents were also unable to contact her friends to find out where she had gone. Liana's family suspected that their daughter might have run away with her boyfriend and decided to contact his parents. And Felipe's family said that their son had gone camping with his friends. So they had no idea where the couple was. The situation became even more complicated because for several days, no one in the family had been able to contact the couple, and their phones had been turned off. Liana's family reported the incident to the police, who then gradually learned about the couple's route after they left home. Through investigation, the police found the last location where the couple left the bus and moved to a deserted dense forest where their phone was last disconnected in Mbukwasi. A large-scale search began with the participation of the police, rescue workers, and people who knew about the incident who decided to help. A large local businessman also joined the search, using his personal helicopter to search from the air and drop leaflets with pictures of Liana and Felipe. After a short time, the couple's camp was found. However, the atmosphere was very tense because they seemed to have been attacked. There were no signs of blood or fighting, but the couple's personal belongings were thrown around. Their tent had been slashed with a knife from top to bottom. While searching the scene, the rescuers found Felipe's mobile phone. But the most terrifying thing was that they soon discovered Felipe's body. The tied-up man had been shot in the back of the head, at close range. It was clear that the chances of finding Liana alive were slim, but the rescue team and everyone continued to search, hoping that Liana was still alive. Liana's father contacted the press to let everyone know about the incident. A large reward had been announced for any information on Liana's whereabouts, but still no leads. After shooting Felipe dead, the robbers took Liana back to the house where they had previously held them both. Here, the robbers, who had been invited by their accomplices Peranbuku and Chiino, joined them. Chiino declared that Liana belonged to him, and he could do whatever he wanted with her. He invited everyone to do whatever they wanted with Liana, and his invitation was accepted immediately. The next day, when they learned of the large-scale search operation, the criminals decided to move to another location to cover their tracks. They moved Liana to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, a member of the gang. That night, the robbers went fishing and Liana went with them. Chiino put his coat on Liana because it was cold and he wanted to show her that he cared. To his surprise, Chiino's brother also arrived. Chiino told his brother that Liana was his lover, and his brother immediately realized that Liana was the one the police were looking for. Chiino's brother took Chiino aside and warned him that the police were looking for Liana. Chiino decided that he had to get rid of Liana. He lied to Liana, telling her that she was free and that he would lead her out into the street. But in reality, Chiino led Liana into the woods. There, he brutally murdered Liana with a knife and then smashed her head with a rock to make sure she was dead. Liana's body was found 5 days after the massacre. Liana was wearing the killer's jacket, which later became one of the key pieces of evidence. The robbers managed to flee without destroying the physical evidence. This naive confidence of the robbers helped the police quickly identify them and arrest all the members of the criminal gang. Chiino left his jacket on the victim's body, which had traces of his sweat on it. In addition, He took the murder weapon home. He tried to wash the clothes with traces of Liana's blood so that he could continue to wear them. According to the results of DNA analysis, the police identified the members of the gang who tortured Liana. Chiino not only did not deny it, but immediately testified, boasting that he had kidnapped, abused, and then killed the unfortunate victim. Chiino describes in detail everything that happened to Liana in her final days. After a lengthy trial, most of the adult members of the gang received quite harsh sentences. Peranbuku was sentenced to life in prison for Felipe's murder. Antonio Geno da Silva, as well as Agnaldo Paes, also received life sentences. But Anthony Matias de Barros was sentenced to only 6 years in prison because he himself did not torture Liana but only provided the gang with his house, where everything took place. However, the gang leader, Chiino, was only 16 years old at the time of the crime. For this reason, Chiino was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a fairly lenient regime. Chiino made several escapes, behaved aggressively, and was unpredictable, so he was assigned to undergo psychological testing. Chiino was found to have some mental abnormalities, which had terrible consequences, turning him into a sadist and murderer without any feelings of pity or remorse. After being diagnosed as such, Chiino was transferred to a medical facility where he underwent mandatory treatment and rehabilitation. No punishment was imposed on him. Chiino has a better life than before his crime. He now has his own room with a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He is fed 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, which is part of the policy of the medical facility where he is detained. Chiino's monthly living expenses are estimated at $1,200, which is about $2,500. In recent years, Chiino has regularly applied for release, noting that he has undergone all of his treatment and no longer poses any threat to others, which means he can return to his normal life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Laci Peterson. Laci Rocha was born on May 4, 1975, to Sharon and Dennis, but her parents divorced when she and her older brother Brent were still young. After the divorce, Laci's mother married Ron, a dairy farmer, who became a father figure to her and played a significant role in her upbringing. Laci was a cheerful and outgoing person with an infectious smile and bubbly nature. She loved talking to people and was always eager to engage in conversations, which made her a natural attention seeker. She thrived in social situations and was known for her ability to light up a room with her presence. Growing up on a dairy farm, Laci developed a strong connection with nature. She spent much of her childhood exploring the outdoors and enjoying the beauty that surrounded her. One of her favorite activities was gardening with her mother, which became a source of joy and fulfillment for both of them. Laci's love for gardening would later influence her interests and career choices as an adult. Laci was a cheerleader at Thomas Downey High School, which was a great fit for her outgoing and bubbly personality. She made a strong impression on her school and became the ideal cheerleader. After graduating, Laci attended California Polytechnic University, where she studied ornamental horticulture due to her interest in plants and wildlife. Laci frequently visited a friend who worked at a restaurant in Morro Bay. It was there that she met Scott Peterson, a co-worker of her friend. Laci was immediately attracted to Scott and was smitten. She took the initiative and gave Scott her phone number. Scott quickly reached out, and they surprisingly hit it off during their first conversation. Scott then asked Laci on their first date, a deep-sea fishing trip. However, things didn't go as planned for Laci, who ended up getting seasick. After a rocky start, Laci and Scott's relationship blossomed, and they eventually decided to live together. Before meeting Laci, Scott had aspirations to become a professional golfer, but as their relationship progressed, his focus shifted, and he chose to pursue a career in business instead. Laci graduated from Cal Poly in 1997, and Scott followed suit the next year. This milestone marked the beginning of a new era in their lives, full of promise and potential. On August 9, 1997, the couple tied the knot in Ayala Valley, San Luis Obispo County. The beautiful resort setting provided a stunning backdrop for their special day. Surrounded by friends and family, they celebrated their love and solidified their commitment to each other. After getting married, Lassie and Scott embarked on a new business venture, opening a sports bar called The Shack in San Luis Obispo, California. The Shack, owned by Lassie and Scott, started off slowly but eventually attracted a steady stream of customers, with weekends being particularly busy. After several successful years, the couple decided to sell the bar in 2000, seeking new opportunities despite its stable income. Following the sale, they moved to Lassie's hometown of Modesto, California, and purchased a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in an upscale neighborhood in October 2000. Lassie took on a part-time job as a substitute teacher, while Scott worked for a European fertilizer company. Lassie devoted herself to supporting Scott, taking care of the home, cooking, and cleaning. She made sure their home was always warm and inviting. In 2002, the couple received exciting news. Lassie was pregnant, and they were expecting a baby. Lassie and Scott were expecting a baby boy, with a due date set for February 10, 2003. They had already chosen the name Connor for their unborn child. On December 24, 2002, Scott stated that he left their house at 9:30 a.m. to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina. Scott said he left Lassie at home on Christmas Eve morning with a busy day ahead of her. She was planning to watch a Martha Stewart show, clean the floor, bake Christmas cookies, and walk their dog, Mackenzie, at the park. However, one of their neighbors found Mackenzie wandering outside their home around 10:30 a.m. and returned the dog to their backyard. When Scott came home from fishing that afternoon, he said the house was empty, with Mackenzie in the yard, but no sign of Lassie. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Scott claimed he showered and washed his dirty fishing clothes as soon as he got home. After his shower, Scott realized Lassie was missing and became concerned. He called her mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron, but they hadn't heard from her all day and were worried about her safety. As the day went on and Lassie remained missing, Scott and Sharon decided to report her disappearance to the police around 6 p.m. They stressed to the police how urgent it was to find Lassie, who was 7 months pregnant with their baby, Connor. The police then questioned Scott about his whereabouts and activities on the day Lassie vanished. Scott told police he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles from his home in Modesto, where he lived with his pregnant wife Lassie. However, from the start, police suspected foul play in Lassie's disappearance. Initially, police didn't treat Lassie's case as suspicious after Scott and his mother-in-law filed a missing person report. Lassie's family defended Scott, and the couple seemed perfect, making it hard to imagine Scott harming his wife. As the investigation continued, police grew suspicious of Scott. About a month after Lassie vanished, they made a stunning discovery. Scott had 2 secret affairs and a long-term relationship with Amber Fry, who contacted police on December 30, 2002, after learning Scott was a suspect in Lassie's disappearance. Amber said she met Scott on November 20, 2002, and thought he was single. 2 weeks before Lassie's disappearance, Scott told Amber that he was a widower and that the upcoming Christmas would be his first without his wife. This revelation raised suspicions among the police, who wondered if Scott had already planned to kill his pregnant wife. To gather evidence, the police asked Amber to make a recorded phone call to Scott, hoping to capture a potential confession. The police informed Lassie's family about Scott's infidelities, and it was when they showed Lassie's mother a photo of Scott and Amber together that she became convinced of his guilt. The search for Lassie was highly comprehensive due to the involvement of the police, her loved ones, and numerous volunteers. In the first 2 days alone, more than 900 people participated in the search efforts. During a press conference, a police officer working on Lassie's case raised concerns that she may not have left her house voluntarily on December 24, 2002. Lassie's disappearance sparked widespread media attention, with the tragic and intriguing tale of a beautiful young woman vanishing from her home on Christmas Eve, captivating the public's imagination. As the public sought answers and speculated about her disappearance, the spotlight on Lassie's case intensified. When Lassie Peterson vanished on December 24, 2002, a $25,000 reward was initially offered for information leading to her safe return. As the investigation yielded no leads, the reward was increased to $500,000 to boost awareness and gather more information. To keep Lassie's case in the public eye, posters were prominently displayed in Modesto, California, and a friend's husband created a website to spread the word. Months later, on April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog in Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park stumbled upon a gruesome discovery in a marshy area. They found the decomposing body of a male infant. The next day, another person discovered the body of a pregnant woman on the east side of the bay shore, about a mile away from where the baby was found. On April 18, 2003, DNA tests confirmed that the bodies were indeed those of Lassie and her unborn son, Connor. Lassie and Connor were laid to rest at Burwood Cemetery. The autopsy revealed disturbing evidence. The baby had 1.5 loops of nylon tape around his neck and a significant cut on his body. Lassie's autopsy showed even more brutal injuries. 2 cracked ribs, her upper torso hollowed out with internal organs removed, and she was missing her head and limbs. The medical examiner concluded that the baby died in the womb and was expelled from Lassie's body after her death. Investigators from the FBI and Modesto Police Department searched the home of Scott and Lassie, looking for evidence of their involvement in her disappearance. The search turned up several crucial clues, including a hair found in Scott's pliers on his fishing boat. After analyzing the hair, the FBI matched it to Lassie's DNA. In addition to the home search, the FBI also thoroughly examined Scott's truck and warehouse, seeking any evidence linking him to Lassie's disappearance. The FBI searched Scott's boat and found a homemade anchor that he claimed was made from a 90-pound bag of concrete, which he had used to repair his driveway. However, the prosecution believed that Scott had created multiple anchors and used 4 of them to weigh down Lassie's body in San Francisco Bay. The bodies found in the bay were later identified as Lassie and Connor, leading to Scott's arrest near a golf course. Notably, Scott's appearance had changed significantly. His dark brown hair was now blonde. When arrested, Scott's vehicle was found to be packed with various items, including a large sum of cash, survival gear, and camping equipment. The police also discovered 4 cell phones and 2 driver's licenses, one belonging to Scott and the other linked to his brother. This evidence suggested to the police that Scott was attempting to flee the state. Scott's father offered an alternative explanation for the driver's license found in Scott's possession. According to his father, Scott had borrowed his brother's license to get a discount at a golf course. As for why Scott's car was packed, his father claimed it was because Scott was living out of his car to avoid the media, who were camping outside his house at the time. Scott's trial began in June 2004, a year after his arrest. During the opening arguments, the prosecution presented its case to the jury, arguing that Scott had killed Lassie because of his affair with Amber Frey. The prosecution highlighted Scott's suspicious behavior in the days leading up to and following Lassie's disappearance, pointing out inconsistencies in his statements to the police. Scott initially told the police he was fishing on the day Lassie went missing, but later told others he was golfing. The prosecution also noted that Scott asked the police if they had used cadaver dogs to search a park where Lassie was supposed to walk their dog, implying that Scott was aware of the potential crime scene and trying to cover his tracks. Scott's defense team presented a strong argument in court, highlighting that Scott's history of infidelity did not necessarily prove he was guilty of murdering his wife. They reasoned that Scott would not give up his life for someone he had only dated 4 times. The defense suggested that Lassie's hair might have been found in Scott's boat because she had visited the marina with him before. During the trial, 2 of Lassie's relatives testified that Scott showed no emotional response when his pregnant wife went missing. New evidence emerged when a realtor testified that Scott tried to sell their home in January, a month after Lassie's disappearance. Additionally, a salesman revealed that Scott traded in Lassie's car after she vanished. The prosecution viewed these events as incriminating evidence against Scott. Amber Fry, Scott's mistress, took the stand and shared details of their affair. The jury listened to secret recordings of Amber's phone calls with Scott, including one where he lied about being in Paris when he was actually attending a vigil for his missing wife. During the trial, a hydrologist and tide expert testified that it was possible for Lassie's body to have been dumped in the area where Scott claimed to be fishing on the day Lassie went missing. However, the defense team argued that there was a lack of credible evidence directly linking Scott to the crime. Their theory was that someone had kidnapped Lassie on Christmas Eve 2002, holding her captive until she gave birth to Connor, and then disposing of both bodies in the San Francisco Bay. The defense attorney emphasized that there was no concrete evidence to connect Scott directly to the crime, and that other suspects could have been responsible. A significant issue arose during the trial when a juror was removed and replaced with an alternate due to misconduct. The dismissed juror had conducted unauthorized research on the case, violating legal procedures. Additionally, the foreman of the jury asked to be removed, and it was determined that his removal was necessary to ensure a fair and just trial. On November 12, 2004, a California jury found Scott guilty of 2 murder counts: first-degree murder for killing his wife Lassie, and second-degree murder for killing their unborn son Connor. The charge of first-degree murder for Lassie's killing carried special circumstances because of the involvement of the fetus, making Scott eligible for the death penalty. After his conviction, the trial entered the penalty phase to determine his punishment. In this phase, the jury considered various factors, including Scott's prior criminal history, circumstances that aggravated the crime, and circumstances that mitigated it. The jury unanimously agreed that Scott should receive the death penalty. After reviewing the evidence, the judge upheld the jury's verdict. He concluded that Lassie's murder was cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous, which led to Scott being sentenced to death. As is automatic in such cases, the sentence was appealed, and the California Supreme Court heard the case in June 2020. During the appeal, Scott's lawyers presented several arguments. They claimed that some potential jurors were unfairly dismissed, that 2 jurors were improperly allowed onto Scott's boat, and that the trial should have been moved to a different county due to biased questionnaire results, which showed that almost half of the potential jurors thought Scott was guilty before the trial even started. The state countered that there was no evidence to support the claim that any juror was unfairly dismissed, and that none of the 12 jurors who ultimately decided Scott's fate were biased. In August 2020, the United States Supreme Court upheld Scott's conviction, but overturned his death sentence. In 2004, a judge resentenced Scott to life in prison without parole, which led to his transfer from San Quentin State Prison to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Around the same time, on April 1, 2004, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, UVVA, into law. Lassie's mother and stepfather attended the signing ceremony. Lassie and Connor's law was designed to provide legal protection for unborn children in cases where their mothers were victims of violence. The legislation recognizes the unborn child as a separate legal entity from their mother, making it a crime to harm or kill the unborn child during an attack on a pregnant woman. The law acknowledges that an unborn child is a victim of violence and deserves the same rights and protections as any other human being. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jenna Oakley. Jenna Oakley was born on March 2, 2001, in Indiana. She lived with her mother and two-year-old brother in a troubled home. Due to her mother's neglect and inability to provide a stable life, Jenna often found herself left alone from a young age. The situation worsened over time, leading to intervention from Child Protective Services in April 2016. As a result, Jenna and her brother were removed from their mother's care and relocated to live with Philip Oakley, who their father, and his wife, Rhonda, who was 52 years old at the time. Rhonda welcomed the children into her home and accepted them as her own. Philip later revealed that Rhonda had been eager to be a good mother to her stepchildren from the start. She welcomed them into her home with open arms and worked to create a safe and comfortable environment for them. Jenna was a difficult child to manage. Despite her academic success, which earned her praise from her teachers, she struggled to follow the rules in her new home. Her behavior became an even greater concern when her parents discovered her relationship with a 20-year-old man named Kenneth, whom she had met at the age of 10 while living with her mother in Indiana. Kenneth was a mysterious figure who seemed to be both a supportive influence and a hindrance in Jenna's life. To better understand the events that unfolded, it's essential to delve into Rhonda's story and explore the complexities of her personality, as well as the significant impact she had on Jenna's life. Rhonda Oakley was born on March 5, 1964, in Casey County, Kentucky, to parents Howard Lee Raines and Mabel Walls Raines. She graduated from Casey County High School in 1982 and went on to work for 30 years in a prominent company that specialized in marketing, packaging, and printing services. Rhonda was a kind, loving, and cheerful person who was highly respected by her friends, who admired her warmth and kindness towards others. Rhonda met Philip Oakley on a golf course, and they fell deeply in love. They decided to get married and start a new life together. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. At the time, Rhonda was divorced and had 4 children from her previous marriage. Philip and Rhonda's family were initially against their relationship due to their significant age difference. They asked Philip to end the relationship, which led to frequent arguments within the family. For that reason, Philip believed the relationship of Kenneth and Jenna was unacceptable because Kenneth was 5 years older than his daughter, Jenna. Philip even threatened to involve the police if Kenneth continued to date Jenna. To maintain control of the situation, Philip and Rhonda took measures such as confiscating Jenna's phone and computer and enforcing strict rules. The situation at home became so unbearable for she that she finally confided in her father and stepmother, promising to end her relationship with Kenneth. However, she failed to keep this promise and continued to secretly meet with him. As a result, her relationship with her parents deteriorated, and she began to harbor a deep-seated hatred towards her parents. On September 1, 2016, at around 4 p.m., David, her younger brother, returned home from school and entered the house. As he walked into the kitchen, he was startled by the sound of 3 of their dogs barking frantically in the basement. Curious, David rushed downstairs to investigate and found his mother, Rhonda, lying motionless on the floor. Panicked, David immediately ran outside to seek help and eventually went to a neighbor's house to call the police. When the emergency services arrived, they were unable to revive Rhonda, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The police found deep cuts on her neck, indicating a brutal attack. Initially, the police suspected a robbery, but upon further investigation, they discovered that nothing in the house had been stolen or disturbed. The investigation into Rhonda's death began, and her family and friends were left wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. As the investigation progressed, several key pieces of evidence came to light. Rhonda's car was discovered to be missing, and a trash can in the kitchen was found to contain vomit. Furthermore, one of the large meat cleavers from the kitchen was found to be missing, leading investigators to suspect that it may have been the weapon used to attack Rhonda. When Philip returned home, he was questioned by detectives and informed them that his daughter, Jenna, had not attended school that day. In fact, Jenna had been unreachable since the incident, and her teachers had called Philip early in the morning to report her absence. This led the police to believe that Jenna may have been kidnapped by the same individuals who killed Rhonda, and that she may be in danger. During the questioning, detectives asked Philip if he knew of anyone who might have wanted to harm Rhonda or the family. Philip revealed that his daughter's boyfriend, Kenneth, had a troubled relationship with Jenna, and that it had deteriorated significantly. Philip admitted that he had threatened to contact the police if Kenneth did not stop seeing Jenna. Philip suspected that his daughter had been dishonest with him and that she and Kenneth had never intended to break up or follow the rules. It was possible that Kenneth had planned to get rid of the source of his problems and take Jenna with him. After learning this, the police focused their efforts on finding Kenneth. They discovered that on August 31st, the day before the incident, Kenneth had flown from Indiana to Lexington, Kentucky, at 3 a.m. From there, he took a taxi to Oakley's house. Another crucial piece of evidence came from a store manager in Denver, who claimed to have seen Jenna with a young man on September 1st. The manager handed over surveillance footage to the police, which showed Jenna and Kenneth entering the store and then leaving together to get into a car that looked like Rhonda's stolen vehicle. Notably, Jenna appeared calm and normal in the footage, not showing any signs of distress or being coerced. Her behavior led investigators to dismiss the possibility that she was being held against her will and raised suspicions that she might be involved in a crime against her stepmother. A search of Jenna's room later revealed a diary that confirmed these suspicions. The diary exposed a deep-seated hatred that her family seemed to be unaware of. Jenna wrote about her ongoing feelings for Kenneth, with whom she had maintained contact despite promising to stay away. Interspersed with these entries were expressions of resentment towards her family members, which grew increasingly disturbing over time. Jenna wrote in her diary that she intended to kill her father, stepmother, and brother to prevent them from ever separating her from Kenneth again, allowing her to be with him without interference. She outlined a specific plan and timeline to carry out these actions. When her father, Philip, read her words, he was overcome with shock and fainted. He struggled to comprehend that his daughter would not only conceive of such a heinous act, but also possessed the determination to make it a reality. Jenna had a plan to kill her family members. First, she intended to kill her father between 4 o'clock and 5 a.m. by luring him to the basement and stabbing him in the neck. Her next target was Rhonda, whom she planned to kill in her bedroom between 6 o'clock and 8 a.m. using the same knife. After that, she planned to kill her brother David in his room. The police discovered Jenna's diary at the start of their investigation, which became the primary evidence against her. Meanwhile, Philip gave the police Kenneth's phone number, allowing them to track and apprehend Kenneth and his girlfriend. On September 4th, 3 days after the crime, investigators located the fugitives in Tucumcari, New Mexico. The police informed local authorities about the case, who quickly located Rhonda's stolen car near a hotel where Kenneth and Jenna were staying. They were arrested and transported separately to a New Mexico detention center, awaiting extradition. However, a search of the car did not yield the weapon used in the attack on Rhonda. Kenneth chose not to face trial. He attempted to take his own life in his cell by hanging himself and wrote a letter. Officers found him and rushed him to the hospital, where he was in critical condition. In his letter, Kenneth claimed responsibility for the crime and stated that he and Jenna acted according to his plan, attempting to take the blame to absolve her. The authorities kept Kenneth's attempt on his own life and his confession from Jenna for a time, deciding it was best she didn't know while being transported to Kentucky. They wanted her to give her own testimony without being influenced by Kenneth's actions. Upon arriving in Kentucky, Jenna also confessed to the crime, providing the police with a detailed account of her actions. According to Jenna, on the day before the crime, Kenneth visited her at her house. They met early in the morning, which is why Jenna didn't attend school that day. They spent the entire day together. Rhonda arrived home around 3 p.m. and encountered Kenneth in the basement. This encounter sparked an argument between Rhonda and Jenna, which eventually turned violent. The violence escalated to the point where Jenna attempted to strangle Rhonda by grabbing her neck. Kenneth then intervened, taking over from Jenna. He grasped Rhonda's throat with such force that she soon lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Once Rhonda was unconscious, Jenna took a kitchen knife and inflicted fatal wounds on her neck, leading to her death. Witnessing the scene caused Kenneth to become ill, and he vomited into a trash can. When questioned by the police about the knife used in the crime, Jenna stated that she and Kenneth had disposed of it during their escape. They had wrapped the knife in a bag and thrown it away at a fast food restaurant. Jenna provided this testimony while Kenneth was still in serious condition at the hospital. He was charged with first-degree murder but was unable to stand trial due to his self-inflicted injuries. After 6 weeks on life support, he passed away. In October 2019, Jenna was formally charged with her stepmother's death. The charges alleged she either caused the death or collaborated with someone else. She also faced a theft charge. Jenna was held without bail at a juvenile detention center. Her father, Philip, stated he didn't care that she was his daughter and felt she didn't deserve his protection after the incident. He hoped Jenna would receive the punishment she deserved. Jenna wasn't informed of Kenneth's death until a court hearing, where she fainted upon learning the news. After regaining consciousness, she screamed, cried, and struggled to calm down. In January 2019, Jenna pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and expressed regret for her actions in court the following month. She expressed remorse for the pain, anger, and disappointment she caused. Upon learning of the plea deal, Philip expressed disappointment, stating that the system failed to prevent the crime against his wife. He claimed there were warning signs that Jenna was in trouble, but no one took action. Philip added that people often advise going to the police immediately, which he and his wife did, yet they still found themselves in a terrible situation. At the sentencing hearing in March, Susan Hooper, a mitigation specialist for the defense, explained that the defendant suffered from abuse, violence, neglect, and lack of basic human rights throughout her life. The lawyer questioned what could have driven a 15-year-old with no history of violence to commit such a crime. The lawyer noted that Jenna had no prior record, was respected by teachers and peers, and it was unclear what led her to take such a desperate step. It was also noted that none of Jenna's family attended the hearing. Philip declined to participate, and Jenna's mother never appeared in court to learn her daughter's fate. This was unusual, as parents typically show interest in the case's progress, even in difficult cases where the accused has committed serious crimes. The lawyer, Susan, gathered extensive evidence and records showing that Jenna was abandoned by her mother, Christ, who neglected her well-being. Susan conducted an in-depth examination of Jenna's early life by reviewing child care and medical records in Indiana and Kent. She also interviewed various individuals who knew Jenna, including neighbors, family friends, caregivers, teachers, school counselors, and her older half-sister. The sister's testimony was particularly relevant, as she had lived with Jenna for several years. According to the sister, they never had a stable or safe home environment. After Christ's divorce from Philip, she started working at a local Indiana prison, where she became romantically involved with an inmate. She eventually posted bail for him, and he moved into their home. This marked the beginning of a nightmare for Jenna, who was only 3 years old at the time. The man consistently robbed them and brought other women into the house, all while Jenna and her brother were present. A neighbor contacted Child Services after discovering that Jenna's family home was infested with rats and that the young children were being left alone all day. When a social worker visited the home, she encountered a hostile mother who refused to let her inside. Upon eventually gaining entry, the social worker was met with a horrific scene. The house was filled with rotting food, piles of trash, rat droppings, and human waste. The kitchen was overrun with unwashed dishes, covered in mold and infested with rodents and insects, including a large number of cockroaches and fleas. The children were living in deplorable conditions, with no regard for their safety. They had unrestricted access to medications and other hazardous substances, further endangering their well-being. Despite efforts to improve their situation, relocating Jenna and her younger brother to live with their father in Kentucky did not alleviate their problems. Susan stated that Philip and Rhonda neglected them, forcing Jenna to sleep in an unclean basement. However, the lawyer countered that Jenna had simply moved from one unstable home to another. Prosecutor Richie Borms presented evidence during the hearing, demonstrating that Philip made every effort to provide for the children's needs and create a good home. Despite the defense attorney's claims, Borms argued that if abuse or neglect had occurred, child care services would have been notified by Jenna's neighbors, friends, or teachers. Furthermore, the prosecutor inquired if the defense attorney was aware of Jenna's relationship with Kenneth and the fact that her parents disapproved of they. The defense attorney stated that Kenneth was the only person who genuinely cared for the accused, Jenna. According to the defense, Jenna's past experiences had left her with unmet emotional needs. She was searching for someone to provide her with the love and care she had always lacked, and having lost that person, she was now devastated. Defense attorney Anthony Lee Taylor presented scientific documents to justify Jenna's behavior. The articles explained how the child abuse Jenna suffered at a young age had negatively impacted her psychological development. Anthony told the court that his conversations with Jenna led him to believe that she lacked parental love and that her strained relationship with her mother contributed to her inappropriate relationship with Kenneth. Jenna supported this statement by reading a letter in which she expressed her deep regret and apologized to her family for her actions. She acknowledged the pain she had caused Rhonda's family and friends and claimed that she had since become a completely different person, distinct from the Jenna who committed the crime. When Philip stepped up to the podium, the atmosphere in the hall became tense. He and his daughter were visibly anxious about the impending conversation. Philip approached Jenna, looked her straight in the eye, and asked what had driven her to commit such a serious offense. He reminded her that as her father, he had always treated her with respect, and that Rhonda had never spoken ill of her or caused her harm. Philip explained that when they took Jenna in, it was to give her a better life, and that Rhonda had cared for her like her own daughter. However, Philip acknowledged that Jenna had been a challenging teenager, and that he and Rhonda had discussed sending her to a specialized institution to help her get back on track. Philip also shared his concerns about Jenna's relationship with Kenneth, describing him as a predator who had taken advantage of his underage daughter. Philip revealed that when he discovered Jenna and Kenneth were still in contact despite being forbidden from doing so, he reported Kenneth to the police and warned him to stay away from Jenna, threatening legal action if necessary. Philip turned to his daughter, visibly shaken. He condemned her crime as unforgivable, citing Rhonda's exceptional character as a wonderful woman and mother, unmatched by anyone. He emphasized how Jenna's actions had devastated not only Rhonda but also others. Philip then questioned why Jenna planned to harm him and her brother, arguing that she was not a victim, but rather someone influenced by circumstance. Despite this, he concluded by reaffirming his love for her, saying that regardless of her actions, she would always be his daughter. Jenna, overwhelmed, burst into tears, shouting at her father that she never felt part of the family and had never experienced his love. Following this outburst, the judge called for a recess to deliberate the verdict. On March 27, 2019, the verdict was announced. Jenna Oakley was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 10 years for first-degree murder and 5 years for car theft. She would be eligible for parole in 2034. This case served as a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails, and those who commit heinous crimes will face their due punishment. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Cassandra Cantrell. Cassandra and Robert were twins. As children, Cassandra and Robert liked to tell each other scary stories in a room with the lights off. Robert was a talented storyteller. Cassandra always found Robert's stories interesting. In every story, Robert played a small but brave man. In addition, Cassandra and Robert also watched the animated series Scooby-Doo together. Although their mother, Mary Smith, did not share Cassandra's passion to instill in her children a love of reading, she bought them many books about scary stories. Loving horror stories was the passion of the two siblings. They even collected figurines of villains and, as adults, seriously considered opening a horror-themed bookstore. Not long after, Cassandra's interest in horror movies brought her to the studio in 2004. She got a cameo role in a scary movie that, although it did not become popular, still made Robert envious of Cassandra. Robert began asking Cassandra to make him a deal. Robert asked Cassandra to give him a role in the movie she was filming. Cassandra readily agreed. Robert was happy, but he couldn't play even a supporting role in a soap opera. The head of the cast in that movie was Colin Dudley, who had a crush on Cassandra since her first days in the movie. At the company Halloween party, Cassandra dressed as Velma from Scooby-Doo and Colin dressed as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. During the party, Colin walked around with a glass of milk all evening, glaring at everyone, just like his character did in the movie, and he also said a lot of quotes from the book. Finally, he stopped in front of Cassandra and said that her beauty made Colin want to destroy it. Cassandra thought it was a compliment and they quickly started dating. But their relationship didn't last long, only a few months. Colin found another actress named Rebecca and began dating her, after which Colin and Rebecca began living together. One day, on August 25, 2020, Cassandra Cantrell suddenly disappeared. When her mother, Mary Smith, tried to contact her, she did not answer the phone. Mary went to report the incident to the police, and a search was quickly launched. After several days of searching, police found her car under the bridge. Also, the bad news was that the car was unlocked and the keys were still inside. There was no reason for Cassandra to appear here. This place was considered a homeless shelter where violence often occurred. Officers had to go through the neighborhood questioning many homeless people. But none of them had ever seen Cassandra, and none of them knew when the car appeared here. The detective participating in the search for Cassandra requested to locate Cassandra's cell phone. The signal showed the phone was in the water closest to the bridge, which meant detectives wouldn't be able to recover it and couldn't get the information they needed. To search more closely, a team of divers was about to search the coastal area for Cassandra. Before starting, they stood on the shore, picked up rocks, and threw them into the water to gauge the distance they could throw. Cassandra's mother mentioned that Cassandra's phone case had rhinestones, making it easy to spot. The phone was soon found, but Cassandra's body was not. Mary expressed her grief, saying she had looked forward to being a grandmother soon and hadn't even had time to set up a crib for her expected grandchild, which was still in its box in the garage. She wondered what to do with it now, unknowingly providing important information for the investigation. According to statistics, many crimes against pregnant women are committed by their partners. However, Mary Smith did not know who Cassandra's boyfriend was. Cassandra was not married and didn't seem to be in a relationship, yet she was pregnant. Mary had no information about him, despite knowing that Cassandra often spoke to someone on the phone. However, the phone number was not saved in Cassandra's phone book, and Mary couldn't recall the number. It's common for girls to confide in at least one friend about their relationships, especially when it comes to something as significant as pregnancy. The police found such a friend, who revealed that Cassandra had reconnected with her ex-boyfriend, Colin Dudley. They had a brief relationship in 2004, but it was surprising that they rekindled their romance 15 years after breaking up. When Cassandra discovered she had been pregnant, she had hesitated to inform Colin. She had recalled an earlier conversation where he had expressed his disdain for having children, even expressing relief that his wife Rebecca had been infertile. Fearing a child would disrupt her relationship with Colin, Cassandra had kept her secret hidden. However, as her pregnancy had progressed, it had become more and more difficult to hide underneath the oversized clothes. To avoid arousing suspicion, Cassandra had stopped seeing Colin, even though she had known she couldn't keep the truth hidden forever. Cassandra decided it had been best to be honest with Colin. So she had told him over the phone that she had been pregnant with his child. Colin had been silent for a moment before replying that he had been happy about the news. Although his tone had seemed a bit off, Cassandra had believed he had truly felt happy. A detective visited Colin's house and knocked on the door. However, the person who had opened the door had been Rebecca, a detective who introduced herself as Colin's old friend and had asked to meet Colin. Without hesitation, Colin had stepped out from behind Rebecca, closed the door behind him, and walked out of the house with the detective. It had seemed like Colin had been expecting this conversation, even though the detective had yet to formally introduce himself. Colin told the detective that he appreciated the detectives for not revealing any information in front of Rebecca. Colin mentioned that he had heard about Cassandra's disappearance and found it strange, and said that he didn't know where she had gone. He explained that Cassandra had told him about a big argument with her brother, Robert. Colin had advised Cassandra to reconcile with Robert but was unsure whether she would take his advice. The detective already knew about the fight between Cassandra and Robert, as Colin had explained to the detective that it had been just a small family misunderstanding, even though Robert had been extremely upset about it. On the day she disappeared, Cassandra had called Colin and said she wanted to talk, but he had refused because of his ego. Now, Colin blamed himself for her disappearance, believing that if he had met her that day, she might not have disappeared. Colin admitted to the detective that he had not been the nicest person, that he had been secretly dating Cassandra behind Rebecca's back for a long time, and expressed his belief that he would probably be punished for it in the other world. Colin also shared that when his father had passed away in 2014, he had a deep hatred for Rebecca. Rebecca often clashed with her father Colin, accusing him of not understanding her. However, sometimes it turned out that it was actually Rebecca who didn't understand her father. After Colin's father had passed away, Colin had wanted to fulfill one of his wishes. His father had been right about some things, and Colin decided to rekindle his relationship with Cassandra. This meant Colin had to end things with Rebecca. Therefore, for 5 years, Colin had lived a double life, which was extremely difficult. Colin constantly made excuses to come home late, telling Rebecca about fake business trips. Colin even bought a fishing rod even though he didn't like fishing. Colin would tell Rebecca that he was going to the lake when in reality he was visiting Cassandra. To make his lie more believable, he bought fish from the supermarket and Rebecca would cook it, despite the fact that the smell of fish made him sick. Things took a surprising turn when Colin discovered that Cassandra was pregnant. Colin did not know who the father was, but Cassandra had confided in a close friend that it was Colin. Colin found this hard to believe. She wanted to have a family of her own with Colin, but this was something Colin could not provide for her. Colin assumed she had found someone else, and he assumed that was why Cassandra didn't want to see him anymore. The detective asked Colin when was the last time he had seen her. Colin honestly replied that he didn't remember, but it was probably about 3 or 4 months ago. Colin said that he had run into Cassandra at the mall, but only briefly because Rebecca was trying on clothes, and he had gotten tired of waiting so he walked to the coffee shop. Colin asked the police officer one last time if they had any chance of finding Cassandra alive. The detective replied that they were doing everything they could and asked Colin to believe him. This was not the last time Colin saw the detective. Although Cassandra's phone was unusable, police had obtained her call records. It turned out that the person Cassandra had been calling frequently was Colin Dudley. Cassandra had called him often, even on the day she went missing. Police also received CCTV footage from the railway station near where Cassandra's abandoned car was found. The video showed a suspicious man standing out among passengers on the platform. He was wearing a long coat, gloves, and a scarf covering his face. A wide-brimmed hat obscured his eyes, making it impossible for police to see his face clearly. However, the detective noted that the man's gait reminded him of Colin Dudley. The hat was similar to the one Colin had worn at the party playing a character in the movie A Clockwork Orange. After tracking the suspect via CCTV, detectives observed him briefly entering a coffee shop, only to leave a few minutes later and head towards the parking lot. There, he got into his car and drove away. Even though his face was obscured the entire time, detectives were still able to write down the license plate number. A search warrant was then issued and a unit was dispatched to Colin Dudley's residence. During the search of Colin's home, detectives hoped that Cassandra was still alive. At first, there was no evidence of a murder at Colin's house. However, in the wardrobe they find the hat that Colin had tried to hide. They then found a basement in his house. When the police went to the basement, they did not find Cassandra there and there was no evidence of a crime. However, the dog detected the smell of blood, became agitated and barked continuously. Colin insisted he did nothing illegal, claiming that the police had no evidence and no other suspects, so they were trying to frame him, and he claimed to be an innocent man. In search of more information, detectives interviewed Rebecca, who was shocked by the surprise search, the allegations against her husband, and the fact that she had been deceived for years. She said many things about Colin and her feelings, but when the detective asked if her husband was capable of murder, she thought for a long time and then answered no. The evidence against Colin was not enough to send him to prison, which angered Robert and Mary Smith. Later, Colin was called in again for questioning. This time, Colin claimed that he had an alibi to counter the charges against him. He said that at 6:30 a.m. on August 25th, he went to a hardware store and bought household cleaning chemicals and trash bags. The store's cameras confirmed this, but the purchase of large trash bags raised suspicions. In addition, Colin received a text message from Cassandra, saying that Cassandra was coming to his house. Colin immediately deleted the message, but it was still stored in the mobile carrier's memory. The police took it from calls and text messages. According to cell phone signals, Colin and Cassandra had not left the house for several hours that morning. Colin turned off his phone but left Cassandra's phone on, possibly accidentally. As a result, police were able to track his movements, including where he was seen on the station's CCTV cameras. Police suspect Colin may have used the cafe to clean up after the murder and wash up in the toilet. Colin drove to where he had discarded Cassandra's phone, which was the last location of Cassandra's cell phone signal. The police need to find Cassandra's body and seize the GPS tracking device on Colin's car to accurately track his route. This device provided new evidence in the case. Following Colin's trail the previous day, the police discovered a large trash can tied with a rope in a ravine in the forest. The ground around the bag was covered in blood, and it was clear to see what was inside. The case happened a month ago, so identifying the body was difficult. However, police were able to identify Cassandra's body thanks to a tattoo described in the search notes. Colin was arrested the same day and charged with murder. Forensic examination revealed that Cassandra's death was caused by a fractured skull due to blunt force trauma. During the trial, the police presented Colin Dudley's motive for committing the crime. However, due to a lack of witnesses and physical evidence, including the murder weapon, it was impossible to convince the jury that Colin was guilty. To resolve the case, the court offered Colin a plea deal stating that if he pleaded guilty, he would receive a reduced sentence. Colin accepted the deal and was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and brother were deeply saddened by the outcome, as they still grappled with feelings of guilt for not having met Cassandra before her death. They are especially worried about the fact that Colin may one day be released from prison, free to live the rest of his life regardless of the crimes he has committed against their family. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie, a 22-year-old woman, was known for her outgoing personality, intelligence, and vibrancy. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, she was the eldest of 3 siblings. Katie is Jean's special daughter, admired for her intelligence and charming personality that attracts everyone. Katie graduated from New Mexico State University with a business degree and had plans to start her MBA program in the fall. To support herself, she worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, Katie met Joe Bischoff and they quickly formed a close bond. Over time, their friendship blossomed into romance. Katie shared her happiness with her mother, Jean, expressing her hopes of building a life with Joe. Months later, Katie's dream became a possibility when Joe proposed to her with a diamond ring. However, after Katie and Joe graduated in the summer of 2003, they faced challenges in their relationship. Katie decided to stay at the university to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city about 350 miles away from Las Cruces. This distance put it difficult on their relationship. Despite this, Katie and Joe made an effort to stay in touch and meet whenever possible. On Labor Day weekend in 2003, Joe visited Las Cruces and spent time with Katie. However, their weekend together turned into a tragedy. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie had fun with Joe and their friends, going from bar to bar and eventually ending up at a local house party. After the party, Katie vanished. The following day, August 31st, 2003, Katie's mother, Jean, received a phone call. This changed her life forever. Recounting that day, Jean described it as follows: she had been preparing for a Labor Day weekend cookout with her family and friends when the phone rang at 2:15 afternoon, bringing news that would shatter her world. The caller asked, "Have you talked to Katie today?" The phone call was from Katie's roommate, Veronica, who had been searching for her and had already contacted Katie's friends and local hospitals without finding any sign of her. Jean was informed by Veronica that Katie had left the party by herself the night before. Veronica and Joe had fallen asleep at the party location, assuming Katie had returned home. However, when they woke up in the morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Her family immediately contacted the police to report her disappearance. Around the same time, a passerby discovered a half-naked woman's body near a desert landfill. Although there was no identification nearby, police officers arriving at the scene concluded that the body had likely been there for less than 24 hours. It was clear to them that the victim's death was no accident. The victim, estimated to be between 20 and 25 years old, had been stripped of clothing from the waist down. Examination of the body revealed self-defense wounds on her arms, indicating she had put up a fight and scratched her attacker. The police found skin particles under her fingernails, providing them with the perpetrator's DNA. Strangulation marks were visible on her neck, initially suggesting it as the cause of death. The investigators concluded that the young woman did not die at the remote desert landfill where her body was found, as there were no signs of a struggle near the scene. Instead, it appears her body was moved there in an attempt to delay the search. A disturbing detect on the victim's body revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting that the perpetrator had tried to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting it on fire. The police quickly made a connection between Katie's disappearance and the discovery of a young woman's body. Katie's father was called to the morgue to identify the body. Katie's mother, Jean, said that the young woman's body was their daughter's. Jean struggled to put into words the immense pain and agony they were enduring. As if they were falling into a deep, dark abyss with no way out, leaving them with no sense of tomorrow or any remaining joy. Katie's father shared that when they lifted the sheet, revealing his daughter's bruised and disfigured face, he was deeply saddened. The residents of once peaceful Los Cruces were shaken by the horrific incident. The police were determined to find the perpetrator as soon as possible, aware that there was no guarantee the person wouldn't commit another crime. The investigation into Katie's case began with a thorough examination of her final hours. The police aimed to piece together her last moments, where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, and if she had any conflicts or enemies. Since the party was about a mile from Katie's home, investigating whether she made it back safely was a priority. To start, the investigators spoke with Veronica, Katie's roommate, and Joe. The detectives found it suspicious that these two stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, stating that Katie had departed, leaving her purse, phone, and keys behind. The investigation team then focused on retracing Katie's route home, going door to door to interview residents, hoping for any leads. Unfortunately, no one saw or heard anything that could help the investigation. Investigations revealed a crucial detect: Katie likely returned to her house but failed to enter it. Notably, she had left her keys behind. Upon searching the house, the investigator found Katie's shoes beside her bedroom window. It appears she attempted to enter through the window but was ambushed. Footprints in the gravel nearby supported this theory. A violent struggle ensued, but sadly, Katie's attacker overpowered her. Further investigation led the authorities to believe that the perpetrator disposed of Katie's body at a desert landfill, attempting to conceal evidence by setting it on fire. The central question remained: was the attacker a stranger or someone Katie trusted? With around 40 party attendees, there was a strong possibility the killer was an acquaintance. Could the perpetrator have been Katie's boyfriend, Joe? This led investigators to interview partygoers, unearthing a critical detail Joe did not mention. Several witnesses reported that Katie saw Joe kissing another girl, which sparked a heated argument between the couple. In her state of anger, Katie hastily left the party alone, forgetting her purse. When questioned by police, Joe neglected to disclose this crucial information. He also did not inform Katie's parents about the incident, despite their curiosity about why Katie had left the party by herself. The investigators questioned Joe again about his whereabouts on the night of Katie's murder. They had discovered that he and Katie had a fight earlier that evening after she saw him kissing another girl. Joe acknowledged the argument and explained that he followed Katie home but did not enter her house. He claimed he saw her bedroom light was off and assumed she was asleep, so he returned to the party. However, the new information sparked suspicion because it indicated Joe was not at the party when the attack occurred, and none of the partygoers could confirm when he returned. During further interviews with party attendees, investigators found another peculiar detail. When he returned to the party, Joe called Katie. Then Joe heard the phone ring, and he realized that she had left her phone at the party. Despite this, Joe continued to phone her until morning. Was he trying to create an alibi or pretend to be concerned about Katie's well-being? Investigators asked Joe to clarify his actions, but he refused to cooperate with them any. Katie loved Joe very much, but he didn't even come to her funeral, which aroused even greater suspicion. Investigators decided to test his DNA. They had collected DNA evidence from Katie's body. mostly under her fingernails, where they found human skin cells. The sample's DNA all belonged to one person. The police needed to compare his DNA to the DNA found on Katie's body. But there were problems with that. Joe was out of town, and his lawyer informed the investigators that Joe refused to provide a DNA sample. The police suspected that Joe was involved in Katie's death, given his suspicious behavior. To confirm that, they needed to find a legitimate way to obtain Joe DNA. However, this took time, and in the meantime, they searched other possible explanations. They investigated similar cases to determine if Katie was the victim of a serial offender. The DNA found on her body was matched against a national database, but no matches were found. The investigators decided to revisit the party where Katie was last seen. They identified the male attendees and asked for their DNA samples, which they all willingly provided. However, none of their DNA matched the samples found on Katie's body, leading the investigators to focus on Joe again. Notably, Joe was the only person who had refused to provide a DNA sample, but the investigators found an alternative method to obtain Joe's DNA sample. Katie and Joe spent time in her bedroom before attending the party, engaging in intimate contact. The police visited Katie's house and collected the bed sheet, hoping to find Joe's DNA. Their efforts were successful, and the lab discovered a sample of male DNA on the sheet. However, the DNA did not match the sample found on Katie's body, indicating that Joe was not the suspect. This discovery raised further questions about Joe's behavior, as he had refused to cooperate with the police despite not being involved in the attack on his girlfriend. The police sent the test results to Joe's lawyer, informing them that he had been cleared as a suspect. Joe agreed to talk to the police again and provided a DNA sample. The results supported the initial findings. Joe was not involved in Katie's crime. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he was worried that his DNA would be found on her body. The mystery surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unsolved for the police and Katie's family. After Joe was cleared as a suspect, the police explored alternative theories. Party attendees informed investigators that Katie was wearing rings, including the one given by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed that the killer removed the rings from Katie's fingers. They searched local pawn shops but did not find Katie's rings. The discovery of specific tire tracks near where Katie's body was found provided another new lead. Experts identified the tire brand and model, and the manufacturer informed the police that these tires were most commonly used on pickup trucks. Unfortunately, this information did not help identify the culprit, and the case hit a dead end. A year after Katie's attack, a similar crime occurred in Wisconsin. A girl in Green Bay was assaulted, set on fire, and left for dead. However, the victim somehow managed to survive by pretending to be dead. Once her attackers left, she put out the flames and sought help at a nearby residence. The survivor described her attackers to the police as two Hispanic men. The police created sketches based on her description and released them to the public. A local farmer recognized the men in the sketches as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Los Cruces, and he often visited them. Both men were arrested. As a result, the police were able to apprehend both suspects. Initially, investigators thought they had identified Katie's attacker, but the DNA test results contradicted this conclusion. The sample's DNA did not match the DNA found on Katie's body. Although Gregorio Morales and Juan were later convicted of assaulting the girl in Green Bay, they were not linked to Katie's case. Gregorio Morales and Juan were sentenced to 50 and 70 years in prison, respectively. The only leads the police had to go on were the tire tracks from the crime scene and the DNA samples of the perpetrator. Katie's family was hopeful that these DNA samples would allow the police to identify the person who took their daughter's life. Unfortunately, there were complications with the DNA evidence. At that time, police were not mandated to collect DNA samples from individuals when they were arrested. Katie's mother was shocked and devastated by the loss of her daughter to a violent man. The family's main concern is to find out the identity of the perpetrator, understand the motive behind this terrible crime, and most importantly, that the killer is held accountable and no longer poses a threat to others. The lead detective gives an update on the case, saying that aside from DNA evidence, they currently lack concrete other leads to investigate further. Katie had fought hard for her life, which resulted in her killer's blood and skin being found under her fingernails. This had allowed investigators to create a DNA profile. Detectives uploaded the DNA into CODIS, the National Forensic Database, and then checked it against the offender database on a weekly basis to see if there was a match. Although they had the killer's identity through the DNA profile, the police needed to find the matching individual in their database to make an identification. Katie's family felt hopeful, they knowing the police would eventually match the DNA to a suspect, bringing them closer to justice for their daughter's tragic death. Katie's murder case saw a major breakthrough 3.5 years later. On December 18, 2006, the lab found a DNA sample that matched the DNA found on Katie's body. The perpetrator was identified as 26-year-old Gabriel Avila, a married man of 2. He has a very long previous criminal record and had been released from prison shortly before Katie's death. On November 13, 2003, Gabriel Avila was apprehended by authorities after breaking into an apartment, armed with a knife. Fortunately, 2 young women inside the apartment managed to evade his attack by quickly locking themselves in the bathroom and dialing 911 for emergency assistance. He was convicted of aggravated burglary in March 2004, but released on bond. A flaw in the system caused a significant delay, and it wasn't until 3.5 years later that investigators were able to link him to Katie's death. Gabriel Avila managed to evade police for nearly a year. Then, he being apprehended in November 2004, based on a tip. He received a 9-year prison sentence. While in prison, Gabriel Avila provided a DNA sample, but it took 2 more years to be tested. Once the results showed a partial match with the DNA from Katie's crime scene, investigators quickly jumped into action. They found the truck Gabriel Avila used to dispose of Katie's body and discovered a ring belonging to her in the center console. In 2006, after finding a ring belonging to Katie in Gabriel Avila's truck, detectives investigating Katie's case visited his in prison. Gabriel Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that while his wife was away, he was in the area to buy illicit substances. He claimed that he approached Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later that night, Gabriel Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He stopped and offered her assistance, and that Katie told him she was locked out without her purse. Gabriel Avila attempted to help her, but he then attacked and began undressing Katie. What followed was a violent assault. After the assault, Gabriel Avila panicked and decided to strangle Katie out of fear that she would identify him. Despite Katie putting up a brief struggle, Gabriel Avila restrained her, unable to let go, ultimately leading to her death. Gabriel Avila claimed he put Katie in his pickup truck and drove her to a desert landfill, where he left her body on the ground. He attempted to burn the body, thinking it would eliminate evidence. But this effort was unsuccessful. A new DNA sample from Gabriel Avila matched the DNA found at the scene. When authorities found DNA on Katie's body in 2003, her parents were optimistic that it would help quickly find a suspect. However, at the time, there was a significant gap in the law. In New Mexico and most states, it was illegal to take DNA when someone was arrested. DNA could only be collected from individuals who had been convicted of a crime and sent to prison. This meant that the DNA on Katie's body couldn't initially be matched. The trial of Gabriel Avila, who was accused of the crime, began in 2017. Gabriel Avila apologized to Katie's family during the trial. His lawyer asked the judge to consider showing leniency, emphasizing that Gabriel Avila was genuinely remorseful for his actions. In contrast, District Attorney Susana Martinez countered that it took Gabriel Avila more than 3 years to confess to the crimes, and he only did so after detectives presented him with DNA evidence. At the sentencing, David, Katie's father, pleaded with the judge to hand down a severe punishment. He stressed that because Katie would never have another opportunity in life, it was only fair that her killer should not be given a chance to be free again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. After serving 30 years, he will be eligible for parole around 2043. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Crystal Rogers. Crystal Rogers, a devoted 35-year-old mother of 4 from Bardstown, Kentucky, shared custody with her ex-husband Keith despite their separation. They maintained a friendly relationship for their children's sake. Crystal lived 45 miles southeast of Louisville with her current boyfriend, Brooks Holt, and their 2-year-old son. As a responsible and reliable parent, Crystal always responded to her mother Sherry Ballard's calls. However, when Sherry couldn't reach Crystal on July 5, 2015, she grew concerned. It was unusual for Crystal to ignore her mother's calls, and Sherry's worry intensified with each passing hour. After 24 hours of silence, Sherry's maternal instincts told her something was wrong. She tried contacting Crystal multiple times, but her efforts were met with silence. Sherry then reached out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone could provide information about her daughter's whereabouts. Crystal's family had not seen or heard from her in a while, which was unusual. Her sister Brooke tried to reach her but couldn't, and her boyfriend Brooks said he hadn't seen her since Friday night, when she was playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When Brooks woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone, and he thought she might have gone to visit her cousin for the 4th of July. However, Crystal's mother Sherry was worried and tried to contact her, but couldn't. She reported Crystal missing to the police, and just then, her son Casey got a call from a friend who had seen Crystal's car on the side of the road. This made Casey and his father Tommy very concerned, as they knew Crystal would never leave her car behind. When they arrived at the location, they found Crystal's car with a flat tire, which only added to their fear that something was seriously wrong. If Crystal had car trouble, she would have contacted someone for help, not tried to fix it herself. The fact that her keys, phone, and purse was still in the car, on the passenger seat, was suspicious. Crystal never went anywhere without these belongings, so their presence added to the concern about her safety. After finding her car on the Bluegrass Parkway, Crystal's father and brother notified the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. Investigators searched the car, but found no signs of a struggle. However, they did notice something unusual. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone taller than Crystal. This raised suspicions that someone else might have been driving her car. The authorities asked for witnesses to come forward, but no one provided any useful information to aid the investigation. The police decided to seek the public's help through the media, releasing Crystal's photo and asking for anyone with information to come forward. Despite their efforts, no significant leads were discovered. Crystal's father, Tommy, took matters into his own hands, organizing search parties to find his daughter. However, the challenging hot and humid weather conditions hindered their searches. Many people helped search for Crystal, but one person who was noticeably absent was her boyfriend, Brooks Holt. The police grew suspicious of Brooks because he seemed unconcerned about Crystal's disappearance. especially since she was the mother of his child. When questioned, Brooks claimed that Crystal and their son had gone with him to his family's farm the night before. Brooks said they returned home around midnight, and he went to bed. He stated that Crystal stayed up late playing games on her phone, as she often did. Brooks claimed that when he woke up at 7 a.m., his son was in bed with him, but Crystal was missing. At first, he thought maybe she had gone out with her cousin. However, those close to Crystal disagreed with Brooks' story. They knew Crystal would never leave her 2-year-old son behind, as they were extremely close. In fact, Crystal's sister, Brooke, believed Crystal was planning to leave Brooks because he had been dishonest with her and showed little emotional attachment. Crystal had told her mother, Cher, that she wanted to end her relationship with Brooks, but she was afraid to do so because he was controlling. Crystal's brother, Casey, had also noticed the tension between them and had seen them arguing several times. The police asked Brooks to come in for questioning and gave him a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive. After the test, Brooks had a formal interview with the detectives. They had gathered evidence that supported his alibi, including a video that showed his truck entering his family's farm and leaving around midnight. However, because the truck had tinted windows, they couldn't determine who was in the vehicle at the time. Brooks explained that while he was at the farm, he did some chores, set a fire to dispose of building materials, and waited for the fire to die out before driving back home. During the interview, the police asked him about a brief 13-second phone call he made to a business associate, Steve Lawson, on his way back from the farm. To clear up any confusion, Brooks asked Steve Lawson to explain their conversation to the police during the interview and called him. However, the police was skeptical when Steve Lawson claimed he had called Brooks to ask for the phone number of a rental property, as it sounded like a rehearsed alibi. According to Steve Lawson, Brooks told him he needed to wait until he got home to get the number from Crystal, who handled such matters. The police were puzzled by this, questioning why Brooks couldn't simply hand the phone to Crystal, who was with him at the time, and resolve the issue right then. They wondered why Brooks had to wait to talk to her in person. During the interview, Brooks received a call from his brother Nick, a police officer at the Bardstown Police Department, who advised Brooks to leave the interrogation room immediately. The police were skeptical that Crystal had voluntarily abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. They suspected that something had happened to her while she was at the Brooks HW family farm. As the investigation into her disappearance progressed, several people came forward claiming to have seen Brooks's truck and his brother Nick's police car at the Howell family farm. Detectives became increasingly convinced that the brothers were at the farm, attempting to destroy evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. To obtain more information, the police decided to bring Nick, Brooks's brother, in for questioning. They confronted him with eyewitness accounts that placed him at his family's farm on July 8th, and asked him to provide an explanation for his presence there. Nick claimed to have no idea what the police were referring to, and said he wasn't out that night. But the police didn't believe him. They directly asked Nick if he and his brother had destroyed or hidden evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. Nick firmly denied any wrongdoing and swore that his brother was incapable of harming anyone. The police officer, Nick, was adamant that he would never assist in covering up a crime, including helping Brooks. After the interview, Nick agreed to take a polygraph test, but he failed 2 questions: whether he knew Crystal's current location and if he was withholding information about her disappearance. Despite failing the polygraph, Nick insisted he was telling the truth. On October 15th, the police investigation identified Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Holt, as the prime suspect in her disappearance. The same day, Nick, Brooks' brother, was fired from the Bardstown Police Department for hindering the investigation. Although the police were confident they knew who was responsible for Crystal's disappearance and death, they lacked sufficient evidence to make an arrest. They were hesitant to take their suspect to court without solid evidence, fearing an acquittal would prevent them from retrying the case due to double jeopardy. In Kentucky, the FBI and local law enforcement joined Crystal's friends, family, and volunteers in an extensive search effort at the 240-acre Ha family farm. Despite daily searches, Crystal's loved ones were left frightened and desperate for any news. The searchers hoped to find Crystal safe and sound, but they also needed answers. At the farm, investigators thoroughly examined the remains of a fire, but they didn't find any human remains. They did discover pieces of clothing in the ashes, but they couldn't link them to Crystal's disappearance. The police issued multiple search warrants for the farm, targeting vehicles and homes. However, these searches didn't produce any significant leads or evidence related to Crystal's case. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about her disappearance, but no one came forward with any information. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's dad, was driven to find his daughter. Her disappearance hit him hard, especially since he'd already gone through a similar tragedy. In 1979, his pregnant sister was brutally murdered by her husband and his friend. They shot her, beat her, and then burned and scattered her remains on a farm. Though it took years, the perpetrators were eventually caught, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. Despite this painful past, Tommy refused to give up on finding Crystal. He pursued every lead, no matter how small, and explored every avenue. He talked to neighbors, interviewed potential witnesses, and contacted anyone who might have information. To aid his search, Tommy spent his own savings on hiring experts, including cadaver dogs and a private investigator. Tommy Ballard was determined to solve the mystery, so he kept detailed records of every tip he followed and clue he found. He regularly met with the police to share his discoveries and get their input. On an early November morning in 2016, Tommy took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, on a hunting trip on their property. Tommy's wife, Sherry, watched as they left, feeling a sense of unease. She quickly said a prayer, asking God to watch over them in the woods. Sherry then returned to bed, trying to relax. However, just minutes later, the phone rang, shattering her peace. When she answered, she heard her panicked grandson on the other end. "Papa has been shot," he cried, his voice trembling with fear. Sherry's heart sank, and she was overcome with panic. She rushed to the bathroom, grabbing clothes as she went, while her grandson continued to cry on the phone. Sherry quickly reassured her husband, telling him she was calling 911 as she rapidly got dressed. Her mind was flooded with worries about his condition. When she arrived at the scene, she was met with an overwhelming sense of grief. She rushed to Tommy's side, shaking him vigorously, but her distress turned to horror as she saw blood gushing from his nose. When officers and witnesses arrived, they quickly pulled Sherry away from Tommy so that medical personnel could tend to him. However, Sherry knew her husband was already dead. Tommy Ballard was pronounced dead at the scene, having been shot once in the chest. Initially, the police suggested that Tommy's death was a hunting accident, which outraged Sherry. She was adamant that this was not an accident, but rather a deliberate murder. As the investigation unfolded, authorities ruled out the possibility that Tommy took his own life, finding that his weapon had not been fired. They also cleared Tommy's 11-year-old grandson of any involvement in the shooting. Eventually, the Kentucky State Police announced that they were treating Tommy's death as a murder investigation. The Ballard family believes that Tommy's murder was connected to his investigation into his daughter Crystal's disappearance. They think those responsible for harming Crystal wanted Tommy silenced, fearing he might uncover the truth. In 2022, the FBI led a 5-day investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance, returning to the Ha family farm to gather more evidence. Their goal was to collect enough evidence to hold the responsible individual accountable. Although the FBI didn't disclose what they found, a spokesperson confirmed in October 2022 that all evidence collected would be analyzed at the FBI's lab in Quantico as the investigation continued. The Kentucky Attorney General made a key decision, appointing a special prosecutor to help with the prosecution of criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy Ballard. Crystal's mother, Sherry Ballard, was informed of the appointment and strongly supported it, believing it was necessary to ensure justice for her loved ones. In July 2023, a Kentucky grand jury indicted 32-year-old Joseph Lawson on 2 counts: conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence, both related to Crystal's disappearance. 2 months later, Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence. The judge set his bond at $10 million and ordered him to avoid contact with Crystal's family. The people of Bardstown felt a mix of emotions when Brooks Houck was arrested for Crystal's murder. While the news was heartbreaking, bringing home the reality that Crystal was not just missing, but had been killed, many felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that justice would be served. The arrest brought a sense of closure and relief to those affected by Crystal's tragic death. Brooks Houck appeared in court virtually 1 month after his October 2023 arrest. This crucial hearing brought new revelations about another unsolved Bardstown murder. The judge asked prosecutor Shane Young if his team was investigating any other cases connected to Crystal's case. The prosecutor was investigating 2 connected murders: Crystal's murder and the murder of her father, Tommy Ballard. They believed they had the gun used to kill Tommy, which they claimed to have purchased from Nick Houck, who allegedly used a fake name during the sale. Brooks Houck's attorneys requested that the Nelson County judge be disqualified from the case, citing bias and unfair treatment since 2017. They also argued that the $10 million bail was excessive. However, the Kentucky Appeals Court ruled against Houck, upholding the $10 million bond and denying his request to replace the judge. In a separate development, Stephen Lawson was indicted in December 2023 on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. Notably, Stephen Lawson's son, Joseph Lawson, had been arrested in connection with Crystal's disappearance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Shanae Brooke Edwards. Shanae Brooke Edwards was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia. Shanae grew up with her parents and older brother Tyson. Although her early life and upbringing are not well documented, her loved ones remembered her as an adventure seeker who loved nature, hiking, motorcycling, and animals. She was a kind-hearted, genuine person who formed deep, sincere connections with others, showing generosity, patience, love, and kindness to everyone she met. In 2019, Shanae traveled to Georgia, a country that had long fascinated her with its natural beauty, rich history, and landmarks. Her boyfriend, Maori El Sayed, a Lebanese national, had planned to join her in Georgia, but was unable to do so because the country's borders were closed to unvaccinated individuals at the time. Shanae resided in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, where she worked as an English teacher. This allowed her to support herself financially while exploring the country and visiting new destinations. She formed close bonds with like-minded friends who shared her passion for travel. On July 29, 2021, Shanae uploaded a photo to her social media profile, captioning it with the single word, joy. The image was taken during a scenic motorcycle ride, an activity she thoroughly enjoyed. The following day, July 30, 2021, Shanae decided to hike up Matatsminda, a popular tourist attraction situated in the heart of Tbilisi. According to her friends, Shanae would often take leisurely strolls in the wooded area near the mountain, and she had never encountered any issues or threats to her personal safety. On July 30, 2021, Shanae left her residence around 3:30 p.m. and was last spotted near the Church of St. Michael of Tavare, located at the foot of Mount Matatsminda, which serves as a starting point for hikers. Chiino was scheduled to meet friends at a cafe in the capital city, but she failed to appear. When attempts to reach her by phone proved unsuccessful, her friends decided to file a missing persons report with the local authorities. Meanwhile, a friend of Chiino's living in California grew concerned and placed a call to Chiino's phone. When the call was answered, Chiino could be heard screaming, "Please let me go, okay? Just let me go," indicating that she was being attacked and desperately seeking release. The call was abruptly disconnected, and when Chiino's friend tried to call back, there was no answer. There are conflicting accounts of what Chiino's friend in California did next. According to some reports, she posted an urgent message to a Facebook group comprised of expats living in Georgia, asking someone to alert the police to the disturbing phone call. Other sources claim that Chiino's friend directly contacted the Georgian police and relayed the distressing details. It is certain that within hours of Chiino making a frightening phone call, Georgian police became aware of it and began to investigate. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers were deployed to search the area, focusing on the slopes of Mount Matatsminda. The search party utilized search dogs and drones, but Chiino remained missing. By sunset, her phone was still off, and she had not visited any local hospitals. This lack of progress was ominous, as was confirmed the following day. Tragically, on July 31st, after an extensive search, 31-year-old Chiino Brooke Edwards was discovered deceased near a hiking trail. The perpetrator attempted to conceal evidence by hiding the body under tree branches and leaves. A knife, believed to be the crime weapon, was found nearby. Chiino's phone was soon discovered on the mountainside. Further inspection of the crime scene revealed an old, rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and numerous empty bottles. Georgia's Interior Minister revealed to local media that the police have uncovered information not yet disclosed to the public to protect the integrity of the investigation. He assured that the ministry and police officers are doing everything possible to find the perpetrator. The forensic examination of Chiino's body revealed 13 stab wounds, with 5 in the neck area, leading the police to conclude that the perpetrator undoubtedly intended to kill the young woman. Signs of strangulation were also found on her neck. After the authorities officially confirmed Chiino's death, the media reported that the crime was motivated by lust, but the Georgian police denied this, citing the forensic medical examiner's failure to find any signs of a crime against the woman's integrity. Chiino's boyfriend, Moody El-Sayed, has vowed to track down the culprit, no matter how long it takes, and exact revenge. Chiino's death was a devastating blow to her friends, and a particularly traumatic experience for her family, who lived on another continent. They faced the difficult task of transporting her body back home, while the police worked to identify the perpetrator. Although the police are directly responsible for preventing crimes and capturing criminals, in this case, there was an added concern. Georgia's billion-dollar tourism industry could be severely impacted by the fact that a tourist had lost her life in the capital city, a popular tourist destination. The police conducted an extensive investigation, interviewing over 200 people, including Chiino's friends, co-workers, neighbors, and employees and visitors of Matatsminda Park. They examined the roots of the case and reviewed video footage of Chiino's movements on the day she went missing. In an expat Facebook group, a local woman reported hearing a woman screaming on the trails below Matatsminda Park around an hour after Chiino left home. Another woman in the same group claimed to have witnessed a disturbing scene on the mountain the day before Chiino went missing, in which a man was seen aggressively assaulting a woman in the same area where the crime eventually took place. At the same time, the laboratory analyzed the crime weapon and discovered a male DNA sample, but no matches were found in the Georgian police database. Consequently, the samples were sent to the databases of 194 Interpol member states for further checking. Witness interviews revealed that Chiino had no enemies, no history of conflict with anyone, and no association with individuals of questionable character. suggesting she may have been a random victim of a crime with an unclear motive. The police conducted a meticulous investigation, collecting genetic samples from several dozen individuals who could potentially have been involved in the crime, and subjected each to rigorous scrutiny. Following a thorough and multifaceted investigation, authorities were able to narrow down the list of suspects until they found a DNA match. 40 days after Chiino Brooke Edwards' death, the Georgia police released a statement announcing the arrest of a 33-year-old man, Rafael Marsokolov, a Georgian citizen born in 1988. The evidence gathered during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance footage, genetic tests, and other proof, led to his arrest on September 8th. Marsokolov's lawyer stated that his client denies all charges, including robbery and the murder of Chiino Brooke Edwards, and has pleaded not guilty. The lawyer claimed that Marsokolov was not involved in the case and has chosen to exercise his right to remain silent. After Marsokolov's identity was made public, his image was broadcast on television. A woman from the Georgian capital took to Facebook to share a post revealing that her friend had been attacked by two men on Mount Matatsmunda a few months prior. And although the police were aware of the perpetrators' identities, the case was closed. She suggested that if the police had done their job properly, the Australian girl might still be alive. Additionally, Marsokolov's own Facebook page revealed that he was an activist for the ruling Georgian Dream Party. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court denied Marsokolov's request to be released on bail while awaiting trial, instead keeping him in custody. The police had obtained strong physical evidence, as well as damning testimony from Marsokolov's brother and wife, who revealed that Marsokolov had confessed to the crime at home. He warned them that if they told anyone about his involvement in Chiino Brooke Edwards' attack, their young child would face the same fate. In October 2021, the Edwards family wrote a heartfelt letter describing Chiino's personality and expressing gratitude to everyone who had supported them. They specifically thanked the government of Georgia for its financial assistance in repatriating Chiino's body and the Georgian people for their ongoing love, attention, and support during this difficult and tragic period. In February 2022, the first hearing on the case took place under Georgian law. Marsokolov faced a possible sentence of 16 to 20 years in prison. At the trial, he chose not to remain silent and pleaded guilty to robbery. However, he denied intentionally taking Chiino's life. The prosecutor disagreed, pointing out that the 13 stab wounds, including 5 to the neck, indicated Marsokolov's intent to kill the victim. After his knife broke, he even strangled Chiino. The defense claimed that Marsokolov has mental health issues and was in an abnormal state when the crime occurred. However, a psychological examination found him to be sane, allowing the court to impose a meaningful punishment based on the severity of the crime. The prosecutor noted that Marsokolov's blood tested positive for powerful drugs at the time of his arrest, but this did not diminish his guilt. Marsokolov admitted his guilt and apologized to Chiino Brooke Edwards' family in his final statement. According to the alleged motive, Marsokolov had intended to steal Chiino's iPhone 12, but his plan was foiled when she threw the phone into a ravine. Only 2 people knew what happened that day, and sadly, one of them is no longer alive to tell the tale. The prosecution requested a postponement of the sentencing, as the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, wanted to attend the hearing. In a statement, Chiino Brooke Edwards' family urged the Georgian justice system to impose a life imprisonment sentence on Rafael Marsokolov, citing the tragic and devastating loss of their loved one, who left behind many grieving friends and family members. On March 9, 2022, a trial was held, at which Rafael Marsokolov was found guilty. Representing the family, Chiino's brother Tyson again requested that the defendant be given a life sentence. Marsokolov apologized to Tyson Edwards, claiming he was not that kind of person and had simply found himself in this situation. Ultimately, 33-year-old Rafael Marsokolov was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, the maximum penalty allowed under Georgian law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rowena Irani. On October 3rd, 2016, Rowena failed to show up to pick up her mother from work, which was highly unusual. Concerned when they were unable to reach her by phone, her mother decided to get a ride home from a co-worker. Upon arriving, she found Rowena lying on the floor, bleeding profusely. She immediately contacted emergency services, and Rowena was rushed to the hospital, but tragically, she passed away the following day. During the investigation, your brother was brought in for questioning and directed them to a possible suspect who had shown red flags throughout this tragic case. Rowena Irani was born on February 18, 1994, in Karachi, Pakistan, to Tehran and Beham Irani. In 2004, when Rowena was 10 years old, the family moved to Wichita, Kansas, seeking better opportunities. The aftermath of the 9/11 tragedy cast a shadow of prejudice on the Irani family, and Rowena and her older brother, Rushad, faced challenges in making friends due to this hostility. Despite the initial difficulties, they gradually found their place and expanded their social circles. Rowena thrived and blossomed into a determined, sociable, and compassionate young woman. She graduated from Wichita Heights High School in 2012 and immediately enrolled at Wichita State University, pursuing a psychology degree with the aspiration of obtaining a master's degree and becoming a counselor for teenagers. Rowena worked at the Wichita Children's Home, a facility that provided refuge for neglected, abused, and emotionally distressed youth. She formed deep connections with the children under her care and demonstrated her remarkable ability to empathize with and support them. In May 2016, Rowena reconnected with an old family friend, a man named Danny Thomas Owens, who had enlisted in the U.S. Army after finishing high school, but had his military service abruptly halted due to a severe traumatic brain injury. Rowena and Danny quickly formed a romantic connection, but concerning behaviors soon emerged regarding Dan's possessive tendencies, controlling attitude, and explosive anger issues. Despite Rowena's reservations, Dan became fixated on the idea of marrying her and starting a family right away, even though Rowena, at 22, expressed her desire to focus on completing her college education before considering such a serious commitment. Danny's insistence on marriage and his intensity alarmed Rowena, making her feel the relationship was progressing too rapidly. When Rowena asked for some space early on in the relationship, Danny responded with a deeply unsettling and desperate letter, pleading for her not to leave him, professing his inability to live without her, and disturbingly hinting at self-harm. Rowena broke up with Danny first because she wasn't ready for marriage and starting a family. After she told him this in person, he seemed to understand and give her some space. However, just a week later, he started pressuring her again about getting engaged, planning the wedding, and future family plans. His actions made it seem like he saw Rowena more as a conquest and fantasy rather than an equal partner. He was trying to limit her to just a domestic role instead of supporting her education and career. This imbalance in their relationship worried Rowena and made her question their compatibility. In September 2016, Danny's aggression had become so severe that Rowena felt the need to share her concerns with her brother, Rushad, who was a police officer. Rowena told Rushad about troubling incidents involving Danny, including his accounts of brutal killings he said he had committed during his military service, even bragging about killing women and children in Afghanistan. These shocking revelations deeply troubled Rowena. Additionally, Danny revealed his plans to kill an ex-girlfriend who had broken up with him, admitting he was vengeful and unstable after the breakup, seriously considering her murder. Rushad agreed with Rowena that Dan was a real threat and warned that he seemed capable of carrying out violent acts against her. On September 23rd, Rowena decided to end her relationship with Dan and cut off all communication with him due to his emotionally abusive behavior and concerning actions. Danny's response to this was to plan revenge instead of respecting Rowena's decision. After undergoing shoulder surgery and being unable to handle a firearm properly due to his recovery, Dan, driven by anger, bought a .45 caliber handgun. Subsequently, on October 3rd, more than a week after their breakup, Dan secretly showed up at Rowena's house while her family was out. Security cameras caught Danny parking his car away from the Irani family residence before sneakily approaching in broad daylight, his arm in a sling to hide the illegal gun he was carrying. He entered through an unlocked door and waited for Rowena to show up. When the 22-year-old unsuspectingly entered the room, he aimed and shot her in the head without warning. This ruthless, violent act against someone he claimed to deeply care for was not a crime of passion, but a cold and calculated murder by an obsessively controlling abuser. After Rowena was shot in a cold-blooded manner, Danny quickly left the scene through the back door of the house and drove away in a hurry to avoid getting caught. On his way, he stopped at different ponds across Wichita to dispose of crucial evidence, such as the handgun magazine and Rowena's cell phone, both of which he had taken in an attempt to hide his actions. Meanwhile, Rowena was left alone, suffering from serious injuries and bleeding heavily in her home until around 4 p.m. When Rowena's mother returned home after being dropped off, she was confused by her daughter not being there to pick her up. As she usually did, unable to reach Rowena on the phone, she got a ride from a coworker to their family home. Upon arrival, she was met with a horrifying scene. Rowena was lying motionless on the floor in a pool of blood, with a severe head injury. Frantically, Rowena's mother called emergency services, but it was too late. Rowena's condition was critical due to the gunshot wound and significant blood loss. Rowena fought for her life at Wesley Medical Center for nearly 24 hours, while her family held on to hope, waiting for a miracle. Sadly, death took her on October 4th at the young age of 22. A promising life, taken by a senseless act of violence. Rowena's family, despite their deep sorrow, were determined to seek justice for her murder. They quickly urged investigators to concentrate on Danny Owens, Rowena's former boyfriend who had caused her fear. Danny was promptly found and questioned. After being arrested and taken to the police station, Danny admitted to holding a grudge against Rowena for breaking up with him. Despite trying to explain that Rowena's death was accidental during intense questioning, evidence proved his claim to be false. In his account to investigators, Danny explained that he spontaneously visited Rowena's residence with the intention of discussing the possibility of reconciling their relationship, hoping to achieve closure. He admitted to arriving unannounced while carrying a loaded .45 caliber pistol, though he claimed the firearm was concealed within his arm sling and that he never had any explicit intention of threatening or harming Rowena. Danny asserted that Rowena suddenly surprised him by turning a corner, causing him to reflexively flinch due to his PTSD from military service. In this panicked moment, he alleged that he accidentally discharged a round in her direction, tragically striking Rowena in the head and causing her to collapse lifeless to the ground. Overwhelmed by panic, he fled the scene and later disposed of the evidence. The detectives dismissed his claim that the shooting was accidental and instead believed it was a carefully planned murder carried out by a vengeful ex-partner. This belief was based on evidence such as security footage, his admission of sneaking up on Rowena with a loaded gun, the attempt to get rid of evidence, and the gunshot wound to the victim's head. In November 2018, Danny Owens went to trial for the brutal murder of Rowena in Wichita. The prosecution presented a strong case with plenty of evidence, both direct and circumstantial, leaving no doubt. They created a story that portrayed Danny as possessive and controlling, leading to violence when he couldn't handle rejection in his fantasies, which tragically resulted in Rowena's death. After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found Danny guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary. He was sentenced to life in prison in Kansas for his heartless act of ending Rowena's life out of wounded pride. Danny will not be able to seek parole for 25 years. and it is unlikely he will be released considering the brutality of his crimes. According to official court documents, he is presently confined to a prison cell at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Hutchinson, Kansas. Reflecting on the tragic story of Rowena Irani, we are faced with the harsh reality of domestic violence and its destructive outcomes. Rowena's life was ended by someone she once cared for deeply, showing us how vital it is to notice warning signs and seek help in abusive relationships. It is crucial that we come together to help victims of domestic abuse and ensure that abusers are held accountable for their actions. Let Rowena's story remind us that love should never be mixed with fear or violence. May her memory motivate us to foster positive, respectful relationships and work towards a world where everyone feels secure and appreciated. It is sad and unfortunate what this monster did to Rowena. She lost her life at a young age with so much ahead of her. As we reflect on this heart-wrenching tale, our thoughts are with the victim whose life was tragically cut short and the loved ones she left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rachel Keeley. Rachel was the eldest of 4 children born to John and Rose Keeley. The family consisted of 3 girls and 1 boy, and they were members of the Jehovah's Witness community. They lived in the Inishmore housing estate, which is located near the entrance to the regional park. Rachel was highly involved in her local congregation and devoted to her faith. After completing her education at Ballincollig Community School, she pursued a career as a beautician. This was a deliberate choice, as it would allow her more time to engage in missionary work with the local Jehovah's Witness community. In the summer of 2000, Rachel took a trip with one of her sisters to work as an au pair, but she soon returned home. She was known as a kind and gentle girl, and she had a boyfriend who was part of her Jehovah's Witness social circle. On Thursday, the 26th of October 2000, Rachel left her home around 4:30 p.m. with her 2 dogs to take them for a walk in the regional park in Ballincollig. She was very familiar with this park, and even though it was getting dark, she would not have thought twice about going there, as she knew the area well and expected there to be other people around at that time. She had only planned to be gone for about an hour, and her mother would have had her dinner ready when she got back, as she had a Bible study that night and would be going straight out again after dinner. But around an hour later, after Rachel left, her mother Rose heard scratching at the back door. It was the 2 dogs, but no Rachel. It was deemed straight away that something was wrong, and Rose and her youngest daughter Elizabeth headed straight to the park to look for Rachel on the path they knew she usually took, but there was no sign of her. By 7 p.m., the family contacted the police. Friends and family all headed out looking for Rachel again. Rose bought flashlights from the local shop so they could see, as it was pitch dark by now. Nearing 8 p.m. that night, a close family friend would find Rachel dead in the undergrowth, not far from the walking track. She was found fully clothed, face down in the fetal position, covered with some briars and branches from trees. The emergency team were notified, but at this point, it was obvious that Rachel was dead. The police immediately initiated an investigation. An intent was placed around the body of Rachel, and 6 police officers stood guard over the body until the state pathologist, Dr. Harbison, could arrive at the scene to examine the body. Rachel's mother would later say in interviews that this gave her great comfort, knowing that her daughter was not alone and that she was protected in death, even if they couldn't protect her in life. When Dr. Harbison arrived, he spent 3 hours examining the scene. Door-to-door inquiries were started straight away at houses nearest to the park. Rachel had last been seen in the park at 5:15 p.m. She was later buried at St. Oliver's Cemetery in Mahon County, Cork, on the 28th of October. Police put out an appeal to people who might have been in the regional park that evening and might provide valuable leads in the case to help determine who had attacked Rachel. Dr. Harbison, the state pathologist, completed a preliminary examination of Rachel's body and determined that she had died from asphyxiation, but needed to do a further examination to determine exactly how she died, whether by smothering or strangulation. Police were also trying to determine the reason behind the attack. Was it a robbery or a sexual assault? Rachel was found fully clothed, but her clothes seemed to have been tampered with. Police politely questioned known sex offenders and locals, and they also wanted to speak with an elderly man and some teenage girls seen in the area at the time of the killing. CCTV footage in the area was also collected from local businesses, and by the 4th of November, it was reported in the local paper that police were looking to collect DNA samples to compare to samples found on Rachel's clothes and under her nails. More than 1,000 males from the area gave samples, but police would not give an indication of what type of material containing DNA was collected from Rachel. On Friday, the 10th of November 2000, news broke that someone had been arrested for questioning in relation to Rachel's death. It was the arrest of a 16-year-old male who was brought to Garda Station in Cork and questioned that night. The teen appeared before a special sitting of the Cork District Court and was charged with the murder and rape of Rachel. He couldn't be named as he was a minor, but it was said that he was from the Ballincollig area. He was remanded at St. Patrick's Juvenile Centre in Dublin. The trial began on May 1, 2000, at the Central Criminal Court in Dublin. Rose Keeley, Rachel's mother, was the first to take the stand. She had told how the dogs had returned to their home an hour after Rachel left to take them for a walk. She said that her youngest daughter, Elizabeth, and she had gone out to search the park for her daughter around 6 p.m, and they called out for Rachel. Elizabeth said she thought she had heard a scream as they continued to search for Rachel. They met the defendant, and they said hello to him as they knew him as he was a neighbor who lived around the corner from their house. Rose said she considered asking him if he had seen Rachel, but thought that she might sound paranoid, so she didn't. 4 boys who had seen the accused on the evening of Rachel's death were also called to testify. They stated that he behaved normally and that they had watched TV at a friend's house around 6:30 p.m. Afterward, they had gone to the regional park to ride motorcycles, but they had left immediately because there was police nearby. The accused had no insurance or road tax for his motorcycle, and he had left it behind in the park. Dr. Harbison took the stand and stated that Rachel had been chased down and most likely dragged to the location where she was found. He said that she had been placed in the fetal position after being strangled in a different area. Dr. Harbison also mentioned that there was no evidence of forced sexual assault, but that her clothes were disheveled. The police told the court that the accused had provided a hair and saliva sample, but refused to give a blood sample as he was afraid of needles. Dr. Maureen Smith told the court that the forensic evidence she collected included fibers taken from Rachel's fleece jacket that matched the fibers from a jumper taken from the accused's bedroom on the day of his arrest, as well as fibers collected from Rachel's pants that matched the fibers of the jumper he was found with, along with semen recovered from Rachel's undergarments and outerwear that matched the DNA the accused had provided. Dr. Smith's evidence was lengthy, and there were concerns that one of the jurors had fallen asleep during her cross-examination, but the court had assurances that this was not the case, and so the trial continued. On Wednesday, the accused's mother said the police came to their house while investigating, and her son was worried about getting in trouble for driving his motorbike without insurance or tax. Someone told him he could get 3 years, so he decided to leave the area, even though she told him not to, as the guardian might think he was involved in Rachel's death. She stated her son was innocent. The accused's father testified that his son left school at 14. The accused was a talented athlete and Gaelic footballer who could have played for the Cork junior team. He was the oldest of 4 children from a stable background and good area, living near the Achilles. They knew Rachel casually, as the accused went to school with her brother. The accused also took to the stand, and he told the courts that on the day of the killing, he had called to his girlfriend's workplace. They had been seeing each other for around 2 years. He stated police had called to him a week before Rachel was killed, giving him a green form which accused him of dangerous driving and driving without insurance and tax. It was a warning and not a summons, but he knew if he was caught again that night in the park, he'd get done for it. This is why he abandoned the bike and why he was going to run away. He said he had met his friends in the park at 5 p.m. after work and went to his friend's house 10 minutes later, but had to admit he went back to the park at 5:20 p.m. after a former babysitter gave evidence that she had seen him in the park at around 5:30 p.m. that day. He agreed with the evidence his friends gave about them leaving the park at 6:30 p.m. to go watch TV at a friend's house and returning to the park at 8 p.m. when he abandoned his bike after seeing police. The accused also admitted that he packed his bags to leave after the police contacted him 2 days after Rachel's death. He also admitted providing false information on the questionnaire about his whereabouts. When he tried to leave, he could not get a train or bus because it was the Guinness Jazz Festival that week, making it nearly impossible to find any mode of transportation. The police soon apprehended him, and since he was a minor, he was returned home 2 days later. They called him and took a saliva sample as part of the ongoing investigation. In court, he also stated that he had not seen Rachel for at least a month, and he had no contact or close contact with her. The DNA evidence was challenged by the defense, and a second expert was called to provide testimony. The expert said the test tubes used to collect the samples were not sealed properly, and there was a theoretical possibility that the samples could have been contaminated. But she also stated that this was unlikely, unless it was done intentionally by an individual. Additionally, it was mentioned that all the samples collected were blood samples, except for the accused, who had provided a saliva sample. Closing arguments then began, and the defense stated that the prosecution was blinded by science, and the jury should remember what happened to the Birmingham Six. Anyone not familiar with this case should definitely look into it. And it was possible for forensic evidence and DNA to be incorrect and misleading. The prosecution said that the accused's parents had lied in the witness box to protect their son and were helping him to leave the country to go stay with his uncle in the UK and not to visit a girl he knew in Kilkenny. The uncle had moved from Ireland 2 years earlier after being convicted of a serious crime and served a prison sentence for it. On Tuesday, the 18th of June, the jury returned after 4.5 hours of deliberation and after being sequestered in a local hotel overnight. They found the defendant guilty of murder and rape by a majority of 10-2. He was sentenced to life for her murder, and the sentence for rape will be determined at a later date in the year. An application for an appeal was denied. The trial lasted 26 days over a period of 7 weeks. The following day, the accused was publicly identified in the press as Ian Horrigan. As he was no longer a minor, he had turned 18. He lived in close proximity to the Achilles Keeley family, who had moved house after Rachel's funeral, as they could not bear living so close to the family of the accused. On November 22, 2002, Horrigan appeared in court again to be sentenced for the rape. He received a 10-year sentence to be served concurrently with his life sentence for murder. His request for an appeal was denied. In January 2006, Horrigan applied for leave to appeal in the courts. His legal team argued that the judge's instructions to the jury were misdirected and misleading. The jury should have been informed that forensic evidence is not infallible, and they should have been told that Seaman's body could have been deposited on the scene several days before being discovered. The Court of Criminal Appeal agreed with Horrigan's arguments, and his conviction was overturned. A new trial was ordered, which took place in February 2006. Horrigan admitted to manslaughter, but the state rejected this plea. Dr. Cassidy, who replaced the ill Dr. Harbison, concluded that Rachel died from an arm lock around her neck, leading to cardiac arrest. Horrigan didn't testify this time. The jury deliberated for hours before finding him guilty of rape, but not murder, convicting him of manslaughter instead. He received an 8-year sentence with 6 years suspended, considering his time served and lack of prior convictions. The Keeley family chose not to give a statement, leaving them and the public outraged by the outcome. The Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, immediately filed an appeal, as they also believed the sentencing was too lenient. On April 19, 2007, the prosecution appeared before the Court of Appeal to request an increase in Horrigan's sentence. The judges agreed with the DPP and determined that Horrigan's sentence did not match the severity of the crime. A sentence of 12 years for each charge, to be served concurrently, was imposed. The time Horrigan had already served would be deducted from this. This meant that Horrigan would not be released until 2010 at the latest, requiring him to serve an additional 3 years. The Keeley family were relieved with the sentencing, as Horrigan was placed on the sex offenders list. However, his criminal history continued. In 2007, he was charged with armed robbery while out on bail for Rachel's killing. He attacked an elderly couple, stole €1,500, and escaped in their son's car. Horrigan initially denied the charges, but was found guilty. However, his conviction was overturned due to issues with the search warrant, leading to a retrial where he pleaded guilty to robbery and theft, receiving a 4-year sentence. In March 2013, it was reported that Horrigan was involved in a violent incident while in Whitfield Prison. He had beaten up Jared London of the notorious McCarthy-Dundon gang, and he had beaten him to a pulp. Horrigan had attacked London in retaliation for an attack by Dundon on a friend of his. Sources from the prison told newspapers that Horrigan was a head case, and that he was moved out of the prison for his own safety. Ironically, only a few months later, Horrigan would be released from prison after serving his time for the robbery. When he left prison, he moved in with his girlfriend Teresa O'Neill, who lived just around the corner from Dundon's home place in Limerick. Teresa's brother, a convicted rapist, Thomas O'Neill, was involved in the Great Low Woods gang rape in County Clare in 2004. At the time, Thomas O'Neill was also the boyfriend of Dundon's ex-girlfriend. From here on in, there is a lot of overlapping with dates and convictions, but I think I've got it right. So bear with me. On the 13th of September 2013, Horrigan was arrested again, this time in relation to a shooting in Limerick. A man stood outside his home the evening before and had been shot, suffering a number of pellet wounds to his chest from a shotgun. A trial took place in January 2015, and Horrigan completed not guilty to the possession of a shotgun with the intent to endanger. He was found not guilty. However, in November 2013, he robbed a shop in Limerick. He had entered the shop, and the man behind the counter tackled Horrigan, but he got away, leaving the scarf he was wearing behind. Of course, when police got the scarf forensically tested, it led back to Horrigan. He was found guilty in 2015 and sentenced to 5 years in prison, with 1 year suspended. By 2016, it was expected that Horrigan would be released once more from prison. His girlfriend posted on Facebook that he would be home for Christmas. But by March 2017, his home in Macroom in Limerick was raided by police, and €3,000 worth of heroin was discovered. 6 months later, a shop in Mallow, County Cork, was robbed at knife point, with nearly €1,400 taken. Within 4 weeks of that robbery, the media reported that Horrigan had gone on the run. He fled to the UK, and police launched a manhunt because he was on the sex offenders list. He was in breach of his conditions, and police had to know where he lived at all times. In June of 2018, Horrigan appeared in court again and admitted to the drugs found in his home. He was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months, with the 6 months suspended. In December 2018, he was in the courts in relation to the off-license robbery, and again he pleaded guilty. He received a 6-year sentence, with 2 of those suspended. He was due for release in 2022. On the 26th of March 2022, Horrigan attacked a woman in her 60s and a man in his 20s with a hammer, leaving the man in critical condition. He was charged with 4 offenses against the state and remanded in prison. He appeared in court in December 2022 and is set to face trial again, but no date has been set. In September 2022, Horrigan was in court again for breaching conditions put on him as a sex offender. He did not notify the Guardian again of a change of address, and he joined Tinder. He was sentenced to 12 months in prison. Rachel's parents have stated that they don't care how long Horrigan spends in prison, as it won't bring back their Rachel. This was not aimed towards Horrigan's other victims, but Horrigan himself. If the justice system didn't always work within these outdated laws, and if the judges had power of discretion, a lot of people would be saved from criminals like this. Horrigan is only 38 years old and has a long life ahead to cause mayhem in this country. Where will it end, and how many more victims will there be? Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to present to you another disturbing case, the case of Paige Bergfeld. The discovery of Paige Bergfeld's car marked the beginning of a perplexing and mysterious story that unfolded on the first Sunday of July 2007. On that day, a red Ford Focus belonging to the missing Paige was discovered. However, the location where the car was found and its condition raised significant questions and suspicions. The vehicle was situated in a remote area Paige rarely visited. Moreover, it was completely engulfed in flames, suggesting that something alarming and unusual had occurred. The county district attorney scrutinized the case closely. His preliminary findings indicated the fire surrounding the car was intentional. This conclusion was corroborated by the fact that nothing else had burned in the vicinity. The strange incident involving Paige Bergfeld's car turned out to be just the beginning of an even more intricate story. June 28, 2007 is a date forever etched in the memories of Paige's family and friends. On that ordinary day, Paige left her 3 children with a friend, Carol Linderholm, early in the morning. Everything seemed normal. No one anticipated trouble or imagined what was soon to transpire. Paige, a responsible mother, always called or came to pick up her children on time. However, when Paige did not return to pick up her children, friends and relatives tried contacting her, but received no response. 8-year-old Jazz, her eldest child, took initiative in searching for his missing mother. After sending several messages to her phone without any reply, Jazz insisted on searching with Carol. They went to the police station, where Jazz reported his mom hadn't returned for him. The community was shocked by her mysterious disappearance, and many were eager to assist in her search. Consequently, a massive public search operation commenced to bring this young woman back to her children and loved ones. That same day, Frank Bergfeld, Paige's father, received a call from an official with the sheriff's department. The message was brief and shocking. His daughter had disappeared. Frank quickly realized something serious was amiss. He attempted to contact Paige, but there was no response. Left with no other option, Frank called his eldest son, Craig, who lived on the opposite side of the country. Without a moment's hesitation, Craig purchased a one-way ticket and arrived in town ready to assist in the search for his sister. Family and friends combined efforts with police and volunteers to initiate a massive search operation. People from various neighborhoods gathered to look for Paige, meticulously combing the surrounding areas and checking every possible corner where any trace of her could be found. The police began by examining Paige's history with her loved ones to determine if they had any involvement in her disappearance. Naturally, authorities directed their attention to Paige's relationship with her first husband, Howard Bigler. Paige and Howard's relationship traced back to her high school years. After graduating from high school, Paige enrolled in the nursing program at the University of Florida, where she met a young man named Howard Bigler. Their mutual affection led them to start dating. Upon successfully obtaining her nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado, where she continued living with her family. In 1995, after some time passed, she married Howard Bigler. At first glance, they appeared as a happy couple. They shared numerous interests and views on life. Nonetheless, there was one significant rift. Paige desired to have children and start a family, while Howard did not share this aspiration. This fundamental disagreement sparked several arguments and many discussions. Attempts at compromise failed repeatedly. Thus, in 1997, they decided it best to part ways through divorce. Despite this separation, their bond remained strong enough that the former spouses continued being friends. Later on, Paige married Rob Dixon, but that marriage too ended in divorce. Following her divorce from Rob, Paige reconnected with Howard once more. Howard claimed he was among the last individuals to see Paige alive on the 28th of that month. They met up in Eagle County, Colorado. It was due to personal business. There, they spent Thursday together. The former spouses then returned to their cities. Howard confirmed that they continued to communicate by phone after the meeting. Upon learning of Paige's disappearance, Howard immediately contacted emergency services. While speaking to the operator, he expressed his concern and belief that something terrible had happened to Paige. The phone recording was corroborated by cell tower data, showing that on the day Paige disappeared, Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area, which is several hours away from where she vanished. This gave police officers reason to remove Howard from the list of suspects. Police began to examine Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and quickly uncovered many events that raised questions and warranted further investigation. It turned out that during their marriage, Paige had reported Rob to the police twice for harassment. After her divorce from her first husband, Paige took a job at a strip club in Denver, where she met Rob Dixon. The man was wealthy and had inherited a large fortune through his family's business. Having fallen in love with each other, Paige and Rob did not hesitate and entered into marriage in 1998. The family settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige fulfilled her dream of becoming a mother. A few years later, the couple had 3 children, who became the most important thing in her life. The first years of marriage seemed happy as Paige and Rob were immersed in a world of luxury, leading a well-to-do lifestyle. However, and quite suddenly, things began to fall apart due to financial difficulties Rob faced. Some of his family's businesses had serious problems, and as a result, the economic situation in the family deteriorated so much that Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy. The financial collapse led to a profound family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated so that Paige contacted emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but the time the police arrived, both claimed to have resolved their issues on their own. A year later, another incident occurred that was markedly different. Paige reported Rob for assault, claiming he hit her while she was holding their youngest child. This time, Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and Rob avoided jail time. The relationship between husband and wife continued deteriorating, leading them to separate. Rob subsequently moved to Pennsylvania. Investigators interviewed him to establish his alibi for the day Paige disappeared. Rob asserted he was at home and could not have harmed Paige. Despite the separation, Rob joined the search effort and was very active in trying to find Paige. Investigating officers left no stone unturned in their quest to uncover clues that might unravel this mysterious case and locate the missing mother. One of the initial steps involved a meticulous examination of Paige's car. Since arson is often used to destroy potential evidence, experts thoroughly inspected the vehicle and discovered valuable information. For instance, the driver's seat had been pushed back as far as it would go, suggesting that a tall man had driven it last. Given Paige's shorter stature, she couldn't have reached the pedals from that position. In addition, they found Paige's notebook in the trunk of the car, with several pages torn out, covering June 26 through June 29th. A few days after a burning car was discovered, a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town due to tire problems. A nearby checkbook caught his eye. He promptly reported it to the authorities. As they investigated that section of the road, they also found medical records, insurance cards, and other items belonging to Paige. Sergeant Weiler noticed that several pages from the checkbook had been torn out, and the items were scattered over a considerable distance. Most significantly, a business card found at the scene became key to revisiting the investigation. It was revealed that Paige led a secret life unknown to her loved ones. The business card indicated she worked under the alias Carrie. This discovery challenged all previous assumptions about Paige Bergfeld's disappearance. From that point forward, police officers faced previously unimaginable circumstances. After her divorce, Paige realized she needed to work hard and earn enough to provide for her children and meet their needs. She's starting a children's clothing business while simultaneously teaching dance lessons and selling kitchen supplies at a company. Despite her busy schedule, Paige always made time for her children, attended Parent-Teacher Association meetings, and stayed active in school groups. However, this new discovery by the police upended everything known before. It turned out she had been living a completely secret life, with another phone used exclusively for professional activities related to her job as an escort. This phone became essential in unraveling the complex mystery that even Paige's close friends and family couldn't have imagined. Investigators were now faced with many questions. Why did such a devoted mother and successful businesswoman decide to live this double life? How was this secret profession connected to her disappearance? All these queries became priority in the investigation, adding layers of complexity and intrigue. Using the cell phone found in Paige's car, detectives accessed a list of contacts and calls made and received in the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call from that phone was made on June 28th around 9 p.m. After analyzing this information, 7 individuals were identified as suspects. One of them was Lester Ralph Jones. Investigators paid special attention to Jones due to his criminal history, which included violence against women and kidnapping. For one incident, he served 5 years in prison. But that alerted the police. A white car, matching the description given by Carol Paige's friend, also raised suspicions. Carol shared crucial details with detectives. She recounted a day when Paige approached her car and noticed another white car blocking her driveway. Annoyed, she got behind the wheel to maneuver out, but ended up colliding with the other vehicle. The unknown driver immediately fled the scene. With this information, investigators speculated that Lester might have been obsessed with Paige and possibly following her. Further digging revealed that Lester Jones had tried to schedule an appointment with Paige the day before she disappeared. When questioned, Lester denied knowing anything about Paige's disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, many suspicious items were found in his home: a disposable cell phone, men's wigs, a sheet with an escort services phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. Particular attention was given to the disposable cell phone found at Lester's residence. Analysis of call records from Paige's cell phone indicated that on the day she went missing, someone tried contacting her multiple times from an unregistered number. When questioned further, Lester claimed he didn't own a second cell phone, indicating he lied to police. Police determined that the phone had been purchased at a supermarket on North Avenue. Store video footage confirmed Lester was indeed the purchaser of that disposable cell phone. When he was shown the video footage, he refused to acknowledge that was him. As a result of all this, Lester Jones became the prime suspect in Paige's disappearance. With no concrete evidence pointing to his guilt, the police to follow him and attempted to find Paige's body in order to have enough evidence to press charges. The case was put on hold for several years. Meanwhile, the young woman's family and loved ones were at a loss for grief. No one knew what had happened to the young mother, and the search seemed hopeless. As time went on, the hope that Paige would be found alive was dwindling. That all changed in 2012 when a hiker accidentally stumbled upon human remains in a ravine among rocks and bushes in Delta County. The find was discovered very close to the road, where Paige's personal belongings had been found 5 years earlier. Experts who arrived on the scene were almost certain that it was the body of the young mother. The experts ran a DNA test, and the results confirmed that it was Paige. She was found, but it was a grisly end to her story. The exact cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the body. However, it was found that Paige had been struck many times as several of her bones were broken, particularly the bones in her face. As a result, it was determined that she died from injuries sustained during the beating. This information added to the horrific drama of the story. Paige's body was underground, and due to years of soil erosion, ended up on the surface. This may explain why she was not discovered earlier. Lester Ralph Jones's case came to a halt for several years after Paige's remains were discovered. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. However, the trial didn't begin until July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors argued that Lester, who already had a history of violence against women, was frustrated at not being able to see Paige after trying to get an appointment with her. The main witness for the prosecution was Lester's ex-wife Lisa. She recounted how he kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s. Lisa Lester found it difficult to come to terms with her decision to end the relationship on multiple occasions. Once, he attacked the couple, gun in hand. Tragically, Lisa's partner was shot in the head. A month later, Lester threatened her again, telling her she might end up at the bottom of a lake. Fortunately, Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police. This led to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. Lester's defense attorneys contended that the police had detained an innocent man. They suggested that other clients of Paige could have had motives for the crime. However, they did not present convincing evidence linking others to the murder. Lester's current spouse also testified before the jury. Despite knowing he used an escort service, she did not abandon him because of her faith. Nonetheless, she didn't provide him an alibi, and even identified him from a surveillance video at a supermarket where he bought a disposable phone on September 9, 2016. The jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict in the first trial, leading it to be declared a mistrial. However, the district attorney was firm in believing Lester's guilt and didn't give up. Over several days, he diligently re-examined all evidence. On November 21, 2016, after thoroughly reviewing all of it, the jury reached a verdict. Lester was found guilty of all charges related to Paige's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Although the defense appealed this sentence, an appeals court panel upheld it in June 2022 and confirmed Lester's guilt. Paige's final farewell took place on April 28, 2012. Her obituary described her as a beautiful and radiant woman whose smile could be compared to the sun. Her tragic loss deeply affected her family and friends. Her 3 children were orphaned and lost their main support and encouragement. Paige's case drew public attention and lasted many years. Nevertheless, law enforcement and relatives persevered tirelessly until justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now he won't be able to harm anyone else. Paige's story underscores why it's vital to fight for justice, regardless of how long it takes or how much effort is required. Her memory will forever linger in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. 22-year-old Brandon Gonsalves lived with his small family in Goregaon West. Now Goregaon West was becoming a crowded suburb in Mumbai city. Besides Gonsalves, his family only consisted of his mother and older sister. On December 19, 2016, like every day, Gonsalves went for a morning walk from his home to Ari Colony. Usually, he would return home within an hour after his stroll, but today he didn't come back until afternoon. Concerned, Gonsalves' mother Seema and older sister Kashma first called his friends because he had left his phone at home today. Despite contacting some friends, they couldn't find any information about Gonsalves. Now, the sun had already set and night was slowly falling. Worried about their son, Seema took her daughter and went to the nearby Dindoshi police station to file a missing person report. Now, besides Gonçalves's family and friends, the police are also trying to find him. Meanwhile, the Dindoshi police station had distributed Gonçalves's photo to nearby police stations as well. However, amidst this, around 12:30 in the afternoon on December 22nd, a call comes to the nearby Ari police station. The caller reports that he has just seen a headless body. Upon hearing this, the police promptly rushed to the reported location in Ari Colony. Upon arrival, the scene they witness astonishes them. There, beneath a tree, lies a body without a head, neck, or clothes, and upon seeing it, it seemed as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Now, witnessing this sight, the police cordoned off the area completely, not allowing any ordinary person to approach. Afterwards, the police began their investigation by first examining the area nearby. Just 20 meters away from the body, the police found the head and clothes stained with blood. Additionally, a few meters away from the body, the police also found some other items used in worship, such as a mirror, coconut, padukas, threads, turmeric powder, and kumkum powder, aka vermilion. Anyway, the police collected these items and sent the body to a nearby hospital for post-mortem. Subsequently, the files of missing persons were checked at the Ari police station, and the identification of this dead body was made with a boy named Brandon Gonçalves. As I mentioned earlier, the missing report of Brandon Gonçalves had been distributed to all nearby police stations by Dindoshi police. So now the Ari police confirmed that he was the same boy who had gone missing 3 days ago on December 19th. Well, now Gonçalves's family is also informed, and thus the missing case of Gonçalves turns into a murder case. After this, as far as I have read, perhaps the police had to form 8+ teams to search for Gonçalves's killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But seeing the body of her only son in this condition, Gonçalves's mother Sima and elder sister Kashma were both in a terrible state of distress. So much so that when Sima saw her son in this condition, she fainted upon seeing the body. However, the police quickly began their investigation to find the culprits. On the other hand, some shocking details emerged in Gonçalves's post-mortem report. The post-mortem report stated that Gonçalves's tongue, voice box, skin from his right cheek, and even his entire neck were missing, with the neck bone intact. This means that someone had killed Gonçalves so brutally that even the small spine as fragment of our neck, the neck spine, was broken. All these things were horrifying the police because initially, the police thought this case seemed to be a result of personal rivalry, as if someone had killed Gonçalves to settle a score, but the police were soon to be proven wrong. Actually, according to the post-mortem report, it was found that Gonçalves' death occurred due to the separation of his head from his body. However, forensic pathologists also checked whether Gonçalves was given any drugs or substances before being killed, but nothing like that was found in any post-mortem report. After that, the police found out that Gonçalves was murdered 3 days before his body was found, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the same day he went missing. Additionally, there were no signs of any fight, struggle, or injury on his body, indicating that Gonçalves didn't even try to save himself until his last breath. Furthermore, 2 marks were found on Gonçalves' body. Actually, there were 2 cross symbols on his forehead and right hand, which seemed to have been made with a sharp object. After learning about all these things, this case became even more intriguing for the police and investigators, because now there were a lot more questions in front of the police. Looking at Gonçalves' body, it seemed as if his body had been cut twice. First, his head was separated from his shoulders, and then later his neck was cut from the head. Additionally, forensic experts said that where Gonçalves' body was found, there was absolutely no evidence of his murder, if not a single trace of blood was found there. So it was clear that Gonçalves was killed somewhere else, and then some parts of his body were removed to perform some rituals or something similar. Later, his body and clothes were thrown away in this deserted place. Here, when the police found the materials of worship and glass, coconuts, slippers, turmeric, and vermilion at the crime scene, for the first time, this case seems like a human sacrifice. After the possibility arose that Gonçalves might be taken to another location and harmed, The police began checking the CCTV cameras around the Ari colony. But first, they checked the CCTV cameras around his house. They saw Gonçalves leaving with his dog around 7 o'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. However, just 10 minutes later, Gonçalves left his house again, but this time with a bag. Now, what was in that bag could not be determined because the bag itself was not found. But then, a little further from Gonçalves' house, the police spotted a white Audi car in another CCTV footage with 2 people inside, a driver and a woman in a white Punjabi suit. It was shown in the CCTV that they were following Gonçalves slowly with their car. The woman wearing a white Punjabi suit is given directions to the driver, telling him to take the car in that direction. However, the police also questioned Gonçalves' family members to see if anyone might know that woman and driver, but the police didn't get any good response from there either. The police suspected that there might be more than 2 people in the car, and unfortunately, the day Gonçalves' body was found, the 2 CCTV cameras in that area were not working. This raised suspicion for the police that Gonçalves was abducted on December 19th in this same car and then murdered elsewhere, with his body being thrown in a deserted place in Ari Colony on the dark night or morning of December 22nd. But since then, investigators have felt that perhaps a local person might be involved in this murder case, because the police checked 70-plus CCTV cameras in this entire case, but none of them recorded anything suspicious that would raise suspicion on any individual. The investigators clarified that perhaps the killers were aware of the location of every CCTV camera in the Ari colony. This helped them in escaping from the colony and Goragayan. This clears one thing, that the killer was someone who was well acquainted with Goragayan and the colony, because an outsider couldn't have known every road in CCTV so well. The investigators explored all possible angles of Gonçalves' killing, such as a love affair angle, whether someone jealous killed Gonçalves, and a personal rivalry, human sacrifice angle, robbery, and property dispute. But the police never found any leads in any angle. Although for some time, the police kept the angle of human sacrifice on the table and even questioned several tantrics, babas, and black magicians about the cut parts of the body, the mark of the cross on the forehead and the right hand, whether there was any connection between them or not. But the police didn't get any help from here either. Gonçalves was a middle-class boy who decided to graduate in arts. However, due to some reasons, he dropped out of college as well. His father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Gonçalves in a state of depression for a long time. During the police investigation, Gonçalves' call records were also checked, but no suspicious numbers were found. In fact, Gonçalves rarely talked to anyone, except for his family, or perhaps 3 or 4 friends. But what intrigued the police in this case was finding a diary in Gonçalves' room. Within it were some sketches that further complicated this case. Actually, if these sketches are examined closely, it will be apparent that they tell the story of 2 sacrifices. In the first, a person is attempting to cut off an animal's head while wearing a suit. Meanwhile, in the second sacrifice, a man's head is being cut off with a saw. In addition to these, an attempt has been made to portray the SpongeBob cartoon character as a monster. On the other side of the page, a picture of a deer without a head has been drawn, and right next to it, only the head of a lion cub has been drawn. Furthermore, when the police went inside Gonçalves' house, they found a strange sign on a wall just behind the door, as if it were some sort of cult symbol. Now, what was even more surprising was that when the Mumbai police tried to recreate the crime scene with Gonçalves' dog, the startling thing was that Gonçalves' dog went straight to where Gonçalves' body was lying with a tree. After a while, his dog arrived at the spot where Gonçalves' body was found, just a few meters away. Among all the cases we've explained on this channel so far, this case was the weirdest, like how Gonçalves' dog somehow went to the places where his body was found. It's possible that when Gonçalves first went out for a walk with his dog on December 19th, he might have already gone to the place where his body was found. Another point is that the white Audi car following Gonçalves might have been known to him, and he might have gone with them willingly, sitting in the car. Additionally, it's possible that after returning home, Gonçalves took the bag with him, which might have contained items related to worship like coconut, paducas, etc. Because it's also being said on the internet that maybe Gonçalves sacrificed himself. Today, it's been over 7 years since this case, but the murderer of Brandon Gonçalves is still unknown. Meanwhile, Gonçalves' mother and sister have made numerous visits to the police station and the crime branch office to find out the status of their son Brandon Gonçalves' murder case. During this time, Gonçalves' mother and sister were afraid that the police might close Gonçalves' murder case. Due to this reason, Seema's elder daughter Kashma appealed to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the state's chief minister to seek justice. Well, if this case gets solved in the future, we will definitely update you through this channel's community post. But so far, this case remains unsolved. With this, Brandon Gonçalves' case also concludes here. Before moving forward, quickly subscribe to the channel. This is strange. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Quickly subscribe to it. Now we are jumped to the next story. This is the story of Madanapalli city in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India, which is Asia's largest tomato market. Besides, there are many mountains here as well. It was January 24th, 2021, around 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night in Madanapalli, when Dr. V. Purushotham Naidu, the head of the Naidu family, called his friend Raju and said on the phone, "Both my daughters are no longer in this world. Alekhya, 27, and Saidivya, 22, have both passed away, but there's nothing to worry about. Tomorrow morning, they will come back through reincarnation because the Kali Yuga is ending, and the Satyug will begin from tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Raju said to his friend Dr. Naidu, "Everything is normal at home? Speaking such language against your daughters doesn't suit you." In response, Dr. Naidu said, "No, Raju, I am telling the truth. In a while, both I and your sister-in-law will leave our bodies in Kali Yuga and be born again in Satyug." Upon hearing this, Dr. Naidu's friend Raju started feeling extremely restless. Consequently, he abruptly ended the call and within a few minutes arrived at Dr. Naidu's house. Raju reached there, knocked on the door, and just as the door was about to open, Dr. Naidu himself appeared, looking completely normal. But when Raju went inside and saw the scene there, his eyes widened in shock, because Dr. Naidu had spoken the truth. Lying on the ground in the prayer room of his house was the lifeless body of his 27-year-old daughter, Alekhya. She had completed her master's in Bhopal and now was preparing for the civil services. Her face was pale, and blood was oozing from various places. After this, Dr. Naidu took Raju to another room adjacent to the prayer room, where the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Saidivya, lay on the ground. She had been struck with a trident of Lord Shiva on her forehead, and a small brass pot placed in the prayer room was inserted into her mouth. The clothes were removed from both bodies, and they were wrapped in red cloth. Additionally, their hair was partially cut, and they were placed in front of the statue of Lord Shiva in the temple. They had scattered many worship materials around the bodies. However, despite seeing the bodies of their daughters, there was no sign of tension or sorrow on the faces of Dr. Naidu and his wife Padmaja. This behavior of his friend and his wife seemed very strange to Raju. Therefore, he bids them goodbye and leaves their house. However, instead of going home, he goes straight to the police station and tells the police the whole story of how these educated parents sacrificed their daughters. He also informs them about the mental condition of Dr. Naidu and his wife. However, the police were having little belief in Raju's story after hearing this strange tale, because for the past year, Dr. Naidu and his family, who had been living in the new house in Madanapalli, had earned quite a reputation in the city. Anyway, after that, the police station in charge, along with some officers, directly reached the Naidu family's house. When the police knocked on the door, once again it was Dr. Naidu who opened it, but seeing her husband's friend with him, Padmaja got very angry and started shouting at the police because they had once again disrupted their worship. Now, the argument between the police and the Naidu family had attracted neighbors from nearby. Now, as soon as the police entered the house and saw what was inside, they too were astonished. Later, after hearing Raju, the police realized that it was a case of superstition. Although Mr. and Mrs. Nayudu repeatedly tried to convince the police that both their daughters would return to life before sunrise tomorrow, they were just saying that they only need a day's time, and tomorrow morning both our daughters will come back to life. Then you all will be surprised. But the police knew that both girls were dead, so how could they come back to life? Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Nayudu were first explained with great difficulty. But when they still didn't understand, the police showed some firmness and took both of them to the police station. Afterwards, a forensic team was called in to investigate the crime scene. The forensic team continued their examination for some time and then sent the bodies for post-mortem. Now, the police have started investigating both inside and outside the house. Here, the police learned from neighbors of the Naidu family that someone from the family used to go out daily to buy something, but for the past 3 days, no one has come out of the house, nor has anyone gone inside, not even the maid who used to clean the house, as these people did not even call her. After that, the police directly approached the maid, who told them that 3 days ago, she was told by the Nayadus that we are going to perform a special worship in the house for 3 days, and until we call you, do not come to work at the house. On the other hand, upon checking both girls' social media profiles and bookshelves inside the house, the police found out that Alekia highly respects Indian philosopher Osho. On his social media posts, Osho's name appeared repeatedly, indicating that he was one of Alekia's favorite people. Additionally, beside Alekia's dead body, was a book by the spiritual guru Meher Baba. Besides, pictures of Shri Sai Baba, Meher Baba, and Osho were plastered all over their house. Furthermore, neighbors often heard prayers and tantric chants from their house, and several times they saw some swamis entering the house. On the other hand, what was surprising was that just a few days before the murder, Alekia posted twice on her Instagram. In one post she wrote, "Work is done," and in the second post, "Shiva is coming." Well, only Dr. Nayudu and Padmaja, who were present in the custody, could reveal the truth behind this. However, controlling Padmaja was proving to be extremely difficult for the police. But before the custody, when the police were taking both husband and wife for a COVID test, Padmaja started saying, "I am Shiva myself. Because of my body particles, COVID has spread everywhere. It did not come from China." After getting their COVID tests done, Dr. Naidu informed the police about his background. Actually, Dr. Naidu had a master's in philosophy and science. In addition, he had obtained a PhD and was currently a professor of chemistry at Government Degree College for Women, Nadanapali. His wife, Padmaja, was a gold medalist in mathematics and had been teaching at the famous schools of Madanapal for nearly 23 years, including at Masterminds IIT Talent High School. Alongside, she also had a master's in science. Additionally, Alekia, 27, was a postgraduate from Bhopal and then an aspirant for civil services. Furthermore, Sai Divya, a 22-year-old, was training at the A.R. Rahma Music Conservatory in Mumbai after completing her Bachelor of Business Administration course. However, due to the lockdown, both of them had to return home. You might also wonder why, with such educated family members, these individuals attempted suicide. You'll find the answer by the end of the video. Afterwards, Alekia picked up Lord Shiva's trident from the temple and thrust it into her sister Divya's forehead. Then a copper vessel was placed in her mouth. Following the death of her younger sister Divya, Alekia told her mother that now she had to kill her. As a result, Padmaja struck Alekia on the head with a dumbbell kept in the house. Consequently, Alekia also died shortly thereafter. After killing both their daughters, Both the husband and wife wandered around their bodies for quite some time. Now, because of the insistence of the wife and daughter, it was Dr. Nayudu's turn. Perhaps out of fear, he called his friend and told him the whole matter, and if he hadn't made that call, perhaps neither of them would be in this world today. However, due to this, Padmaja scolded her husband, Dr. Nayudu, a lot, saying, "You are a coward. Because of you, our secret got out, and our daughters couldn't come back." After seeing all this, it was finalized in this case that due to mental illness, all these family members had planned this, and it was revealed from a psychiatrist's source that their entire family was dealing with a rare disorder called shared psychotic disorder. Actually, in this disorder, more than two people who are in close relationships have a similar way of thinking. And it's because of this disorder that Alakia and Saidivya are no longer in this world today. In this double murder case, Alakia had a Canadian friend who told the print media that he couldn't believe for many days that Alakia could do such a thing. After questioning on Monday evening, funeral of both these girls were performed, and permission for this was given only to Dr. Nayudu, while the girl's mother, Padmaja, was not allowed to participate for some reasons. In my opinion, in this case, Saidivya and Dr. Purushottam Nayudu seem innocent to me. Although if they hadn't fallen into the temptation of Alekia and Padmaja, perhaps this would have been a happy family today. So with this, the case comes to an end here. Friends, how did you like this combined cases? Do you want to see such combined cases in the future too? Please share your opinion in the comment box. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now.